Chapter 2699. What crime did you commit? Gambling. Okay, I got it. Go back quickly. Chu Ho did not delay any further. She did not even have time to change out of her uniform. She took the phone and rushed out of the door. She started the car and dialed Song Chao An's number. The call was quickly connected. Hello. It's me, Chu Ho. Chao An, what happened? Sister Chu, please come back. Something happened at your house. An hour ago, 2 men rushed into your house and seemed to have abducted Xiao Bao. When I walked out of the door, I saw Meng Qingxue running after them. She fainted on the ground. I held an umbrella and was about to rush over to help her up when a few more cars arrived. A few people got out of the cars and took her away. I don't know where they went. Where did the car drive to? It seems to be in the direction of the county. Could she have been sent to the hospital? Chu Ho's facial muscles stiffened. She hung up the phone, put on her helmet, and rushed to the county's hospital. There was only one big hospital in the county. The police station was not very far from the county. When she arrived, she was surprised to see a row of high-end cars parked at the entrance. She was very sensitive. Looking at the license plates, she guessed that they were from the capital. However, the license plates were a little unique. They were white with red lettering and were not ordinary license plates. She instinctively associated these cars with Meng Qingxue. Her heart tightened. She was so anxious that she did not even have the time to lock her car. Hugging her helmet, she rushed into the emergency room. Only 2 rows of lights were on at the entrance of the emergency room. She walked over and was surprised to see a row of men in suits standing at the entrance. Her sixth sense told her that Meng Qingxue had been sent to the emergency room. Chu Ho walked over. When she got close, she was stopped by a few tall and burly men. Sorry, you're not allowed to come close. Chu Ho looked up and said coldly, I'm looking for Meng Qingxue. Upon hearing the name Meng Qingxue, the men looked at each other in surprise. Mu Yanqing was sitting on a bench by the entrance, holding his forehead with a troubled look on his face. Suddenly, someone approached him and cautiously reported, Chairman Mu, there's a woman looking for Meng Qingxue. Who? I'm not sure, but he was wearing a police uniform. Mu Yanqing raised his head and followed the man's line of sight, only to see a woman standing upright a few meters away. She was holding a helmet in her hands with a deep look in her eyes. His pupils couldn't help but shrink. He felt that this woman's face was very familiar, as if he had met her before. Let her come over. He remembered that his subordinates had investigated this woman before. This woman was probably the one who had helped Qing Shui settle down. Yes. Chu Ho was allowed to pass, and she immediately walked over. She raised her head and saw the light at the door of the emergency room. Emergency treatment in progress. Her heart suddenly clenched. She turned around and asked Mu Yanqing, Is Qingxue inside? Mu Yanqing asked warily, Who are you? Shouldn't you introduce yourself before asking for someone's identity? Chu Ho replied expressionlessly. The man at the side saw that she was being rude and wanted to step forward. Chu Ho was about to retaliate when Mu Yanqing raised his hand to stop him. This is none of your business. Yes, Chairman Mu. He looked up and met Chu Ho's eyes. Suppressing his anger, he suddenly said in a deep voice, Mu Yanqing. That heartless man? Chapter 2700. My name is Chu Ho, and I'm Qingxue's good friend. Good friend? Mu Yanqing was obviously a little suspicious. I don't remember her having a good friend named Chu Ho. What do you know about her? What can a man who can't even protect his woman and child know? Be more polite with your words. Chu Ho said indifferently. I'm already showing you the greatest respect by not punching you the moment I saw you. Mu Yanqing was speechless. Chu Ho had no intention of bickering with him and slowly explained, I met her more than a month ago. At that time, she had just arrived in Yen City and was unfamiliar with the place. She was harassed and bullied by 2 hooligans. I was in charge of this case. Seeing that she was alone and pregnant, I let her stay at my house to rest and nurse the baby. She was bullied by 2 hooligans. Mu Yanqing caught the main point, and a hint of viciousness flashed across his eyes. What happened? It's very dangerous for a person to stay in a hotel alone in the middle of the night with tens of thousands of yuan in cash on her. I don't know how a pregnant woman like her could end up in such a helpless state. With that, She looked at him meaningfully. Mu Yanqing was once again rendered speechless by her teasing. Why? Are you feeling guilty? It's good that you know that you're guilty. You don't have a bad conscience. Chu Ho asked again. How is she now? Mu Yanqing ignored her. Chu Ho did not have such patience. She had been anxious along the way, and when she saw that he did not respond, she became even angrier. She immediately took a step forward, grabbed him by the collar, and interrogated him. I'm asking you a question. How is she now? Let go. Someone immediately rushed over to her side. She grabbed that person's hand and flung it away. Get lost. This is none of your business. Chairman Mu. Get lost. Mu Yanqing was also annoyed and reprimanded. The people around him immediately retreated, trembling with fear. Mu Yanqing sucked in a deep breath of cold air and clenched his fists tightly. By the time I arrived, she was already unconscious on the ground. On the way to the hospital, her condition didn't seem optimistic. The doctor said that I probably can't keep the baby in my womb. What? Chu Ho frowned. Her gaze was suddenly attracted by the dried bloodstain on his sleeve. Her heart skipped a beat and her mind went blank. How could this be? It was just a fall, it shouldn't be that serious, right? When she was pregnant, she also fell a few times, but nothing unusual happened. Chu Ho suddenly realized that Meng Qingshue's body was weak to begin with. When she thought of this, she fell onto the bench in a daze. Her gaze was numb. Half an hour later, the door suddenly opened and a doctor in a white coat walked out. Chu Ho raised her head abruptly and was about to rush over when Mu Yanqing walked up to the doctor before her. Doctor, how is she? The doctor sized him up. His attitude was still polite, but his tone was calm as if he was used to the vicissitudes of life and death. Are you asking about the adult or the child in her womb? Sir. Chu Ho also walked over anxiously. When she heard the doctor's words, she suddenly had an ominous premonition. Could it be that the child could not be saved? Sir, are you the husband of the lady inside? Chapter 2701. Mu Yanqing was stunned for a moment before he regained his senses. As if he had just woken up from a dream, he smiled bitterly. I am. Do you still want that child? The doctor asked again. Why do you ask? If you don't want that child, get rid of it as soon as possible while it's still young. If you want it, protect your wife and child well. Don't try to be mysterious. Mu Yanqing could not take it anymore. No matter what, I have to protect the mother and child. I asked you a question and you haven't answered me yet. How is she? Is she all right? The doctor sighed. The situation is still considered good. It's not the worst outcome. She was sent to the hospital in time and the child was saved. However, what happens next may depend on the situation. This lady's body is weak. Although the child in her stomach is saved for the time being, if her body is not taken care of properly, the child will eventually be miscarried. I found out that there were signs of miscarriage before this. This is not a good sign. Signs of miscarriage. That's right. There was such information in the report that his subordinate had given him. She seemed to have almost suffered a miscarriage. Chu Ho asked nervously. In other words, the mother and child are safe, right? The doctor nodded. This is only a temporary situation. We can't guarantee that this fetus can be saved. If the later care can't keep up, I'm afraid it's a little dangerous. Has she regained consciousness now? Yes, she has regained consciousness. Help her with the procedures immediately and transfer her to the ward. Mu Yanqing was about to turn around when Chu Ho immediately stopped him and said slowly, Go in and take a look at her first. You're not familiar with this place, but I'm more familiar with it. I'll help her with the procedures. Okay. Mu Yanqing did not hesitate and immediately went into the emergency room. On the hospital bed, Meng Qingshuo slowly woke up. The nurse had just given her a dose of pregnancy-stabilizing injection and a round of injections. She was in so much pain that her body stiffened for a moment and tears streamed down her face. She could not take pain very well. Injections were not very painful, but this time, they were injected with gonadotropin, so they had to use sterilized injection water. This kind of sterilized injection water was extremely painful. What was even more painful was that she would have to receive an injection every day depending on the situation. It turned out that the pregnancy stabilizing needle was so painful. She remembered that when she was in the modeling industry, she had heard of a story about a model who became a mistress and eventually married into a rich family. However, when she got pregnant, she was already 40 years old. This elderly woman had already had 3 miscarriages. Actually, at her age, pregnancy was a high risk. But after marrying into a rich family, everyone in the family had their eyes fixed on her belly. After all, with her background as a model, it wasn't easy for her to climb into a rich family. Naturally, her belly had to work harder. Therefore, for her 4th child, the doctor said that her cervix was not functioning properly. In order to keep this child, she was bedridden for 142 days and injected with more than 300 doses of pregnancy-stabilizing injections. Finally, she was able to give birth to Lin. More than 300 fetus-stabilizing needles were said to be very painful. Meng Qingxue scoffed at first, but when she experienced it herself, she deeply understood the pain. When she thought of the torment she would have to go through every day, she suddenly felt as if she could not see the light of day. Chapter 2702. You. What are you doing? You can't get out of bed yet. Xiao Bao. Xiao Bao. She muttered. The thought of Xiao Bao being taken away without any news made her anxious. Mu Yanqing pushed the door open and walked in. Seeing her arguing with the nurse and wanting to get out of bed, he immediately rushed forward and held her. What are you doing? Hearing his voice, Meng Qingshue's body stiffened. She looked up in a daze and saw that it was him. Her eyes reddened immediately. Yanqing, why are you here? Without waiting for him to explain, Meng Qingxue suddenly pushed his chest with all her might. I don't want to see you. Go away. I don't want to see you again. Mu Yanqing, didn't I say that we're done? Mu Yanqing's eyes flashed and his face tensed up. I never said that I wanted to cut ties with you. That's your unilateral declaration. Meng Qingxue opened her mouth but did not say anything. Instead, tears gushed out of her eyes. What do you want in order for you to let me go? Her almost begging tone made him feel complicated for a moment. Especially when he saw her pair of weak and helpless eyes. He actually felt as if a sharp sword had pierced his heart, causing him incomparable pain. Where is the child? Meng Qingshue's face turned paler as she stared into his eyes. Mu Yanqing, on the other hand, was perplexed. He did not know what the child she was referring to was. What child? Meng Qingxue obviously thought that the 2 men who had taken away Xiao Bao were his subordinates. She was stunned when she saw his confused look. A 5-year-old child. Mu Yanqing, don't play dumb with me. Didn't you send 2 men to find me? They kept saying that they were looking for the child. Aren't they here for the child in my stomach? She gasped for a while, then angrily grabbed his collar. They misinterpreted your words and took Xiao Bao Chu away. I don't care if you want to abort the child in my belly or what. Do as you please. After all, this child is also your flesh and blood. You have the right to decide her life and death. I won't hide anymore. I won't run anymore. But that child is innocent. I don't understand what you mean. Qingxue, have you misunderstood something? Mu Yanqing was baffled. Didn't you send someone to look for me? Of course. However, I definitely did not give any other orders. I sent people to look for you, not to kill the child in your stomach. Mu Yanqing vowed solemnly. Meng Qingxue was startled, and her face immediately turned pale. What did you say? Mu Yanqing explained. Qingxue, do you know? After you left, I've been trying to track you down. It wasn't easy to get news of you, so I rushed over without stopping. As for the child in your stomach, I will never abort it. I'm more than happy that you're willing to give birth to it for me. I'll take on the responsibility of a father and raise the child together. Meng Qingshue's eyes lost focus. She was not in the mood to listen to him, but her mind was constantly reminding her of a fact. Since those 2 men were not sent by Mu Yanqing, who could they be? Chapter 2703. Then who could it be? Where could the child have gone to? By the time Chu Ho was done with the paperwork, Meng Qingxue had already been transferred to the ward. The moment she stepped into the ward, Meng Qingshue's face turned pale and tears streamed down her face. Chu Ho! Xiao Bao is missing. Chu He was stunned. Her expression froze for a moment, and she found it a little unbelievable. She had always thought that Xiao Bao was in Mu Yanqing's hands. She could tell that Mu Yanqing was here to look for Meng Qingxue and had no intention of harming her or the child in her stomach. Otherwise, he would not have gone through so much trouble to send her to the hospital for emergency treatment. When she first arrived at the hospital, she was also thinking about Xiao Bao. However, Meng Qingxue was in a critical condition at that time, so she did not think too much about it. Hence, she did not remember to ask about it. However, Meng Qingxue told her that Xiao Bao was missing. Xiao Bao isn't with you? Chu Ho was a little surprised, but her face turned pale. In the middle of the night, 2 men barged in and took Xiao Bao away. I chased after them with all my might, but I couldn't catch up to them. Meng Qingxue cried sadly. Chu Ho, it's all my fault. It's all my fault. I've implicated Xiao Bao. Chu Ho did not understand the situation for a moment and only caught the key words. You said that Xiao Bao was taken away by 2 men? I don't know who they are either. They only said that they were looking for a child. I thought that they were sent by Yanqing. Chu He sucked in a deep breath of cold air, and her breathing suddenly quickened. Bang! A loud sound was heard. In the darkness, Xiao Bao was awakened by a violent movement. He suddenly opened his eyes, only to find that the car had stopped at some point. The bang! Just now was the sound of the front passenger door closing. He looked out of the car window. Outside the window, the sky had already begun to brighten. In the distance, the sky was turning white. It was actually dawn. Outside the window, there was a vast field, but it was more like a wasteland than a field, overgrown with weeds. While he was in a daze, the car door was pulled open. Chu Xiaobao was shocked and immediately shrank his thin body into a corner. His mouth was taped, so he could only make frightened sounds. The man's face couldn't be said to be fierce, but after all, he was a child. Coming to such an unfamiliar environment, he must be lonely and helpless. The fear in his heart was infinitely magnified. The man stepped onto the car and reached out to grab Chu Xiaobao's collar. However, Chu Xiaobao kept shrinking back and shaking his head desperately. Come here. The man immediately scolded him. Damn it! Behave yourself. Baby Chu was even more frightened now. He curled up and did not dare to move an inch. The man lost his patience as well. He reached out, grabbed the boy's arm, and practically dragged him out of the car. Being dragged out of the corner alive, Xiaobao stumbled and almost rolled out of the car and fell to the ground. Ouch! It hurts. Xiaobao was in so much pain that tears welled up in his eyes. The man kicked him a few times. Didn't I tell you to behave yourself? You can suffer less. Chu Xiaobao looked at him with tears in his eyes. His eyes were red and swollen, and he looked very pitiful. However, the more the man looked at him, the more impatient he became. He lifted him onto his shoulder. After suffering some pain, Xiaobao became more well-behaved. He stopped kicking his legs and obediently leaned on his shoulder. Chapter 2704. This was the most remote and desolate area in the capital. It used to be a famous industrial zone, so many factories were located here. Later, in order to control the smog, the capital's government focused on the industrial zone and moved the factories to other cities. The factories here were abandoned. Initially, the government wanted to demolish the factories here and develop them into parks or gardens. Alas, this area was notorious for being poisonous. It used to be a rice paddy, but after it became an industrial zone, the sewage levels far exceeded the standards and polluted the river. The surrounding fields were barren. When half of the factories were demolished, the landscaping department came to investigate and found that the land was seriously polluted and unsuitable for a park, so it was abandoned. Many factories were put on hold halfway through the demolition. The subsequent development projects were all stalled. In order to avoid being noticed, Xianxia chose this deserted place. There was a warehouse here. The man carried Xiao Bao and kicked open the side of the warehouse. He found a stool with a missing leg and tied him to it. Xiao Bao glared at him with tears in his eyes. The man warned him a few more times before walking out of the door to make a call. Hello, is this Miss Song? Yes, I've brought him here. When will you be coming over? Are you on your way? Okay. 20 minutes. No hurry. We'll wait for you. Baby Chu, who was separated by a wall, could only hear the man's words. It seemed that a woman was coming over. Was he really abducted by human traffickers? Xiao Bao was trembling with fear and could not sit still. After the man ended the call, he walked in again. Together with him, the man in charge of driving came over with 2 cans of beer. He gave him a can and a packet of ham and bread. Come, have some beer to refresh yourself. After driving for an entire night, he was very sleepy. In order to report to the police, he did not stop to rest along the way and drove 130 kilometers to the destination. The 2 men were obviously exhausted. Big brother, how much do you think we'll get for completing this mission? This employer is very generous. She said that as long as we bring him here, she'll give me 500,000 yuan in cash. The other man was speechless. 500,000. So much. Haha. Once we get the money, we'll split it in half. I heard that you're going to get married. With 250,000 yuan, you can build a decent 3-story house in your hometown. The man grinned from ear to ear. This employer is so generous. 500,000. I've never seen so much money in my life. What is this? Work hard with me, and you'll be able to earn a few 100,000 next year. The man spoke boldly, and the other person was also greatly encouraged. When Chu Xiaobao heard this, he was even more certain that he had been abducted by human traffickers. Suddenly, he started to cry. Woo woo woo. Along the way he was travel-worn. He curled up in a dusty corner and his face was covered in dust. When his tears washed over him, it was inevitable that he looked a little unkempt. However, the 2 men were indifferent. They only glanced in his direction and sneered. You don't say, this child has delicate features. She's very pretty. I don't know why this mysterious employer wants to kidnap this child. I don't understand. Chapter 2705. Don't ask too much, it won't do us any good. Thus the 2 men started chatting among themselves. After an unknown amount of time, Baby Chu suddenly heard the sound of a car's horn coming from outside. His head jerked up, and the 2 men became agitated at once. They looked at each other and walked toward the door. A Volkswagen Magenta was parked outside. Xianxia alighted from the car, and the 2 men greeted her warmly with smiles. Miss Song, you're here. He's already in the warehouse. Hee hee. Their faces were full of flattery. Xianxia hummed in acknowledgement. Wearing a pair of sunglasses on her face, she looked calm and unperturbed as she asked warily, Did anyone notice us along the way? No. We hid the child in a corner. No one noticed him. Xianxia cocked a brow when she sensed that something was amiss. Child. What she wanted was Meng Qingxue. How could it be a child? Yes. We did everything according to your orders. Xianxia looked even more surprised. Ignoring the surprise in her heart, she immediately said, Bring me to have a look. The 2 men also noticed that her expression was a little strange. They did not bother to exchange pleasantries and immediately led her in respectfully. Xianxia had just stepped into the warehouse when the dust in the air assailed her nostrils. She waved her hand in disgust, and the 2 men at the side immediately waved for her as if to flatter her, chuckling. There's quite a lot of dust here. Where is he? She asked. One of the men grinned and pointed at Xiao Bao, who was tied to a stool. There. He's over there. The moment he spoke, he had a strong local accent. Xianxia frowned again and looked in the direction he was pointing, only to see a 5-year-old child tied to a stool. He stared at her with a pair of innocent eyes as he trembled in fear. Her face turned pale. She turned around abruptly and swept a sharp glance at them. What do you mean? Are you playing with me? Miss Song, what do you mean by that? The man stared at her in confusion. This child isn't what I want. Why did you kidnap this child? Xianxia looked furious. Didn't I give you a woman's photo? Where's that woman? Huh. The 2 men widened their eyes and looked at each other in dismay, but they were a little stunned. One of them mustered up his courage and asked, Miss Song, didn't you say that you want a child? We found that woman, but you said that you want a child, so we've captured this child. Xianxia understood everything at once. Useless. It turned out that they had misunderstood her intentions. They had kidnapped the innocent child and brought her here, but the person she wanted was not brought here. She was so angry that she wanted to slap each of them. Fortunately, she still had a trace of reason. These 2 men came from remote villages. They were barefooted and not afraid of wearing shoes. If she hit them, they would be angry. In the wilderness, she could not guarantee her safety. She forced, Xianxia's, Xianxia good. Are you all idiots? What I want is the child in that woman's belly. This. Chapter 2706. After a long while, they finally reacted and asked tentatively, "Does this mean that we've got the wrong person?" "This deal doesn't count." She spat fiercely and turned to leave. Seeing that she was about to leave, the two men exchanged glances and immediately rushed forward to stop her. "You're leaving just like that? How can this deal not count? We went through so much trouble to drag that person here, and now you're saying that the deal is off? Does that mean that all our hard work was for nothing? You didn't bring the person I wanted. Why? Do you still want money?" She snorted and tried to walk around them, but the men blocked her again and blocked the door. It was obvious that they would not let her leave just like that. She sized them up and sneered. "What? Are you guys going to rob me?" The man smiled rudely. "Miss Song, you have to follow the rules when doing business. We're just following your instructions. How can you blame us for not making yourself clear? How do I know that you're doing things for me honestly? You didn't find the person you wanted, so you just kidnapped a child and did a half-hearted job. Do I still have to obediently pay you a commission? That's not how it should be. Miss Song, how about this? Since the person we brought isn't the one you wanted, we still put in the effort. What we want is not bad, so we deserve 100,000 yuan for our hard work." She could not help snorting. "You guys are asking for too much." The two men exchanged glances, and their expressions changed slightly. They were no longer as polite as before. She felt inexplicably guilty, but she did not show it on her face. Instead, she asked coldly, "Do you know who I am? How dare you stand in my way? No matter who you are, even if you're the emperor, I don't care. Let's not talk about 500,000 yuan, but we still have to pay for our hard work. More or less, we have to show some appreciation, right? In order to bring that person here, we worked through the night. If you want to leave without paying us a single cent, we won't let you out of this door." Xianxia was at a loss for words, but she was sober enough to realize that she could only admit that she was at a disadvantage by making a deal with such a person. Thus, she took a few deep breaths and expressionlessly fished out the cash from her handbag. When the two men saw that her handbag was full of cash, they exchanged glances with each other. One of the men suddenly reached out and snatched her handbag. Xianxia was taken aback, only to see the man calmly take out all the cash from her handbag. She weighed it in her hand and estimated that it was about 50 to 60,000 yuan. She guessed that the rest of the cash was in the car, but they knew not to make things difficult for her. Once they got the money, they threw her handbag on the ground and turned to leave. Xianxia was so furious that her lungs were about to explode. She watched as the two men got into the car and sped off, leaving her speechless. She was about to leave when she suddenly thought of something. She turned around and looked at Xiao Bao, who was left in the warehouse. She frowned but did not say anything. She turned around and left. Although this child was a little pitiful, she naturally could not care about him, lest she got herself into trouble. He might as well just leave him here. Whether he lived or died, he would be left to his own devices. Chapter 2707. He was safe. This meant that he was no longer in danger. However, he soon realized that he was abandoned in the wilderness like an abandoned cat or dog. What should he do? How could he find his way home? Xiao Bao's mind was filled with thoughts of how to get home. However, what made him anxious was that all four of his hands were tied up. Moreover, he could not even give out the detailed address of his house. What should he do? Xiao Bao forced himself to calm down as soon as possible. At this critical moment, this little guy was considered smart. He knew that he could not just sit there and wait for death. He should try his best to leave this place. He glanced at the stool he made and suddenly had a flash of inspiration. He suddenly struggled and swayed. The chair was old. It had been raining for many years and the warehouse had a lot of water. The solid wood back of the chair was badly corroded. After being tossed around by him, it actually fell apart. Both of his hands were handcuffed to the pillars of the back of the chair. When the chair fell apart, he held onto the back of the chair and struggled to the side of the wall. He used his body to hit it hard. After several attempts, the back of the chair finally cracked. He struggled hard and the pillars of the back of the chair completely fell apart. Both of his hands were freed, but the handcuffs could not be removed. However, he could finally leave this godforsaken place. Xiao Bao was about to walk out of the door when he suddenly caught a glimpse of 2 pieces of half-eaten bread and ham on the ground from the corner of his eye. He struggled internally for a while and picked them up. He did not eat or drink for the whole night. He was already famished and his stomach was growling. Therefore he could not care less. However, the little guy had a serious obsession with cleanliness. He wiped the places where the bread was stained with dust and carefully tore off the places where they had bitten. He took a bite and hid the remaining bread and ham in his trouser pocket before leaving the warehouse. When he walked out of the door, what entered his eyes was a barren land. He looked at the horizon and judged the direction. The little guy was smart. He walked to the road and asked around. One road was wide and unobstructed. On one side, there was a small road that led to a dilapidated area. Looking at the end, there was a barren forest. On the other side, there was no end in sight. If I choose a good road, I should be able to reach the county, right? The little guy grew up in the countryside, so he only had a rough idea of a county town. In his impression, a county town was extremely prosperous. Once he reached the county town, he could ask the police for help. His mother said that if he encountered any danger, the first thing to do was to look for the police. The police would help him find his home. He thought optimistically as he walked in the direction he had set his mind on. Fortunately, he had slept in the car for a night, so he was still quite energetic. However, he didn't know how long he had been walking, but the road was still endless. He walked to the junction of a national highway and suddenly found a road sign. He ran to the bottom of the road sign. He was not very literate, but he could vaguely recognize a few commonly used words. The arrow marked 3 directions. It was a 3-way road. He was in a dilemma. However, the little guy had his own way. Chu Xiaobao raised his little finger and poked at the road sign. Point the soldiers, point the generals, point the soldiers, point the generals, I will go that way. After confirming the direction, Xiaobao finally made his choice. Chapter 2708. In the afternoon, the sun was a little strong, making his mouth dry and thirsty. Even if he was hungry, he really could not swallow the dry bread. Hence, he took out the ham with heartache and took a bite to allay his hunger. Usually, it was not that he had not walked the mountain roads, but after all, a child's physical strength was limited, and so was his willpower. However, he had a firm belief in his heart, to find the way home and return to his mother's side. Otherwise, his mother would be worried sick. He could not let his mother worry. He must pull himself together. Just like that, the little guy supported his tired body, hugged the little dry food left, and walked until the sky turned dark. The sky gradually darkened. He was so tired that his head was dizzy, and his clothes were drenched in sweat. At night, the temperature suddenly dropped sharply, and the wind also became stronger. When it blew on his body, the chill came in waves, and the pores on his skin shrank. Chu Xiaobao did not know how long he walked until the sky turned dark. Finally, he could not walk anymore. In addition, it was late, so he found a cleaner place, sat up, and curled his body into a small ball to avoid the wind. His heel was in terrible pain. He took off his shoes and realized that a layer of skin on his heel was abraded. That place was painful even when touched. He walked for the whole day, and in the end, he was limping. Chu Xiaobao felt a wave of sadness, and his nose twitched. He felt that he was really pitiful to be left alone in the wilderness, and he did not know when he would be able to walk back to the county. He took out the dry food from his trouser pocket. There was only half of the ham left, and the bread had been wiped out in the evening. He hugged the ham and was about to gnaw on it, but a few whimpering sounds came from the side. He was shocked, and turned back to look vigilantly, only to realize that it was a dirty little white dog. It was thin and weak, and looked very young. Its originally snow-white fur was now dirty and gray, but that pair of innocent and pure eyes, set against the moonlight, were bright and lively. The little dog's eyes stared fixedly at the ham in his hand. This little dog was probably hiding here, as a dog's nose was more sensitive. It smelled the fragrance of the ham, and so it walked over. Chu Xiaobao saw the little dog staring at the ham in his hand, licking it with its tongue carefully, as if it was not brave enough, and actually did not dare to go forward. Seeing its skinny appearance, he could not help but feel a little heartache. But now he was in trouble. He only had this little food left. After eating it, there would be no more. Moreover, he was so hungry that he couldn't take it anymore. He was using the empty fort strategy. This little bit of food wasn't enough to fill him up. Sorry. The boy's heart ached as he apologized. I'm hungry too. If not, I'll let you have this piece of ham. The little dog naturally could not understand human language. It tilted its head and continued to stare at that piece of ham, and from time to time, it sized him up, as if it was begging for alms. That pair of innocent eyes was hard to reject. Chu Xiaobao simply did not look at it. He steeled his heart and turned his head away. Just as he was about to gnaw, he heard another whimper beside him. He looked over again. The little dog was probably starving, and in the end, it actually laid down not far away from him, still looking at him helplessly. Its aggrieved look really made one's heart ache. Chapter 2709. Xiaobao hooked his finger at it, but the puppy did not dare to come over. He broke the ham into 2 halves and tempted it. The puppy was still on guard. It wanted to go forward, but it was afraid that he would hurt it. Xiaobao put the other half of the ham aside and did not bother about it. He turned his head to eat his own. Seeing that he was not looking at it, the puppy carefully crawled forward. It used its claws to hook the ham and held it in its mouth. It brought it to a corner and chewed on it with relish. Perhaps because they were starving, the two of them finished the ham in no time at all. The puppy gradually lowered its guard against him and slowly moved to his side. It sniffed the corner of his shirt and rubbed against him, as if it was not afraid of him anymore. Xiaobao smiled and hugged it in his arms. He gently stroked its fur. Good boy. Good boy. Will you sleep with me tonight? Just as he finished his sentence, the puppy's ears pricked up as if it had caught the rustling of grass in the wind. It suddenly turned its head and looked in the direction of the road, eyeing it covetously. Xiaobao followed its gaze and looked over. After a while, he heard what sounded like a row of cars driving over. There's someone. He carried the puppy and stood up in surprise. After a while, he saw a row of cars driving over at high speed and whizzing past him. He did not even have the time to wave his hand as the cars drove away in the opposite direction. Wait. Seeing that his only chance of survival had passed him by, Xiaobao was extremely unwilling. He lowered his head in frustration and was about to give up. However, he thought that this was probably his only chance of survival. After thinking for a while, he suddenly furrowed his brows and made up his mind. He put on his shoes again and chased after the cars. The puppy was also intelligent as it chased after him. After chasing for a long time, Xiaobao suddenly realized that the row of black cars had stopped not far ahead. At the same time, there was a very big van. He saw a glimmer of hope and regained his full strength. He ran towards the place where the cars were parked. When he ran to the place where the car was parked, he found that the people in the car were not there, and he did not know where they went. He tried to pull the door, one by one, seemed to be locked. Just as he was in despair, the Mercedes-Benz at the front of the line was not locked. The door opened, and without thinking, he went straight into the warm car. Wow! It's so warm! Xiaobao sat on the high-end leather seat, feeling extremely satisfied. He carried the puppy in and closed the car door to keep the cold wind out. The back seat of the car was very spacious, so spacious that it was frightening. He stretched out his legs and lay down comfortably. Out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly caught a glimpse of a cup on the cup holder of the armrest of the driver's seat. He hesitated for a moment before taking the cup and opening the quilt. There was actually tea inside. Smelling it, it smelled so good. He was already thirsty. He held the cup and drank to his heart's content. However, he was kind enough to leave a small mouthful. He held it in his hand and put it in front of the puppy. Here. You're thirsty too, right? The puppy immediately used its tongue to lick the water clean. After drinking the tea, the little guy was tired. It did not know when the owner of the car would return. Hence, it nestled in the car and fell asleep in a daze. Chapter 2710. Not far from where the car was parked, there was a large wasteland. At this moment, it was already late at night. The sky was as dark as ink, and not a single star could be seen. The two teams agreed to meet in the wasteland to carry out the transaction. The van parked by the roadside was full of military weapons and an order of 200 million in cash. Among the crowd of people dressed in suits and leather shoes, Gu Jinglian was surrounded by fully armed bodyguards. He was wearing a white shirt, black slim-fit trousers, and a long trench coat. Dressed in black, he almost blended into the night. His sharp black hair was smooth and black. Perhaps it had not been trimmed for a while, as the fine hair on his forehead covered his deep eyebrows. His eyes were unruly, and the slightly raised corners of his eyes were tinged with a bit of awe-inspiring but cold evilness. At the corner of his eye, there was a mole that added a touch of coquettishness. His angular facial features were engraved with deep shadows under the night sky. The earring on his ear was extremely eye-catching, and it set off a somewhat evil and unrestrained temperament. His face was extremely handsome, and such a face was somewhat incompatible with his identity. Back when the Gu clan had a change of power, he was still a young man when he first took over. On the day he took over, he was also dressed like this. His face was handsome, like a beautiful young man. Everyone in the Gu clan, from the elders to the hall masters of the 4 great halls, did not take him seriously. However, contrary to his appearance, his methods were extremely ruthless. From when he took over the position of the head of the family to when he suppressed the rebellious forces in the family, it was only half a year. Everyone in the Gu family was convinced. Under his beautiful appearance was an extremely cold heart, and his scalp-numbing sharp and ruthless methods. It was said that there was an elder who wanted to seize power and push him out of the position. Gu Jinglian did not care about the brotherhood at all. He broke the tendons of the elder's hands and feet, cut off his palms, and expelled him from the Gu family without batting an eye. It was obvious that he was ruthless. The cold wind blew. He silently lit a cigarette, and a wisp of dense smoke escaped from his lips. Suddenly, a bodyguard walked over and whispered in his ear. "President Gu, the other party's men are all here." Gu Jinglian glanced at him slightly, but the voice that escaped from his lips was incomparably clear and extremely magnetic. "How many?" 20 men and 5 cars. He pursed his lips. "You didn't bring your car?" The other party said that they want to trade with the truck and tow it away. Gu Jinglian flicked the ash from his cigarette and said calmly, "Let them come over." "Yes." That person retreated, and not long after, the other party's troops were brought over. The people who came were also dressed in black. The man in the lead was quite old. He was tall and thin, with a beard and deep wrinkles. He was obviously in his 30s, but he looked like he was in his 50s, like a rotten piece of wood. "Boss Gu, haha, I've kept you waiting. However, we also arrived early. It's just that we're not familiar with the place and got the wrong direction." When that person opened his mouth, his signature smoker's voice was extremely hoarse. Gu Jinglian turned to face him and looked him up and down with a deep gaze. It was obvious that he was scrutinizing him. Chapter 27:11. Gu Jinglian glanced at him but did not extend his hand. Instead, his gaze fell on the other party's outstretched hand. His 5 calloused fingers were thick and ugly. Years of smoking had turned his fingers yellow and looked a little dirty. Gu Jinglian was known for being a clean freak. He frowned in disgust and said coldly, "Your hands are really dirty." His tone was condescending and somewhat contemptuous. The man's face immediately showed some embarrassment. He already knew that Gu Jinglian was arrogant and did not take anyone seriously. Hence, he resentfully retracted his hand and tried to smooth things over. "Boss Gu is young and full of vigor. You're full of style." Gu Jinglian said expressionlessly, "There's no need for unnecessary pleasantries. Our time is precious. Let's make it short. We'll hand over the money and the goods at the same time." "Yes, yes, yes." The man immediately snapped his fingers and the men behind him immediately walked over with a few suitcases. Gu Jinglian glanced at them. There were a total of 6 large suitcases. "Didn't you say cash?" Gu Jinglian frowned. "There isn't 200 million in cash here, right? This is only a part of it. The rest is in the car." "US dollars? You don't have to worry about that. Anyway, the price we agreed on before will not change." Gu Jinglian smiled slightly and waved his hand gently. The men beside him walked over and were about to take the suitcases from them when the man said, "Boss Gu, didn't you say that we'll hand over the money and the goods at the same time? Before the official transaction, you should at least let us see the goods you brought, right? The process of checking the goods cannot be skipped." Gu Jinglian glanced at him and sneered. "Sure." In front of the van, the door slowly opened. The huge warehouse of the van was filled with unassembled junhuos. The 200 million order was all here. The man immediately sent someone to check the goods. Half an hour later, the man jumped out of the van and said to him, "The goods are all here. They're all good stuff." The man suddenly smiled and turned to look at Gu Jinglian. "Not bad. Very sincere. These are all good stuff. I'm very satisfied with the goods." "Then it's time for me to see your sincerity." Gu Jinglian smiled. 200 million in cash is accepted. The car keys are yours. You can drive this car. This truck is my gift to you for our first meeting. Sure. The man gave a look, and his men immediately presented 6 large suitcases in front of him. Gu Jinglian casually opened them, but what he saw was a box full of white powder. The curve of his lips suddenly turned cold, and he frowned slightly. White powder, this thing was not unfamiliar. The previous agreement was 200 million in cash, plus the 5 million deposit that was previously transferred to his account, but now it was just a few boxes of drugs? A hint of coldness appeared on Gu Jinglian's face. He closed the box and looked up coldly. "What is this?" His voice sounded like it was sealed in ice. The man immediately explained, "Don't look down on these. They're all good stuff. They're all top-quality goods. These are all top-quality goods from Myanmar. After some processing, they can be sold at a high price. It's definitely more than 200 million. For this deal, I'm willing to part with my treasures. Originally, I planned to keep these goods for myself." Gu Jinglian's eyes did not waver. His voice gradually turned cold. "I remember that I asked for cash." There was a hint of danger in his cold voice. Chapter 27:12. The man laughed dryly. He, we came here in a hurry. We didn't have time to prepare. Also, it's dangerous to carry so many US dollars with us." The atmosphere froze. Gu Jinglian sneered. His cold expression sent chills down one's spine and made one shudder. He picked up a packet and blew the thin film with his fingertips. The white powder flew with the cold wind. "I want cash. How stupid are you to think of using these things to trade?" "This." The man's expression suddenly turned ugly. "Gu Jinglian, these are all good things." "You?" Gu Jinglian interrupted him impatiently. "Do you know the consequences of wasting my time?" "What?" Before the man could finish his sentence, he saw Gu Jinglian suddenly take out a gun from his waist. He loaded it neatly and aimed it between the man's eyebrows without any hesitation. Bang! Blood splattered everywhere. "What are you doing?" The other party immediately took out their guns, but Gu Jinglian's men moved quickly. Bang! 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 Along with the gunshots that had been silenced, the group of people became cold corpses on the ground in the blink of an eye. Gu Jinglian did not have the patience to stay at the scene. He turned around expressionlessly. The bodyguards beside him immediately followed and escorted him to the car. "Mr. Gu, how should we deal with these people? Do you still need me to teach you?" Gu Jinglian was in a bad mood. He opened the car door and ordered coldly, "Check carefully. Don't leave anyone alive. Clean up the scene." "Yes." He turned around and was about to get into the car when he caught a glimpse of a child curled up quietly in the corner of the back seat. The puppy in his arms was alert. It immediately woke up when it heard the gunshots. When it saw someone open the door, it glared at Gu Jinglian fiercely. It bared its teeth and its eyes suddenly became fierce and vigilant. The child, on the other hand, was sleeping very soundly. The gunshots just now did not wake him up. Perhaps he was too tired. Once he fell asleep, he would be unconscious. Gu Jinglian looked at him and saw that his clothes were white from washing. His body was stained with mud, his shoes were tattered, his hair was messy, and his originally delicate and cute little face was covered with dust. He was in a sorry state. Where did this kid come from? Gu Jinglian was a little surprised. He had only left for a while, but he did not expect to see another child in the car when he returned. He raised his head and looked around. This was a desolate place that he had purposely chosen for the transaction. There were very few people around. Where the hell did this kid come from? When the bodyguard saw this, he was also very surprised. Just as he leaned over to wake the child up, the dog in Chu Xiaobao's arms immediately reacted and barked. The barking woke Xiaobao up. He suddenly opened his eyes and sat up straight. His clear and beautiful eyes met Gu Jinglian's. Ah! Gu Jinglian's eyes were filled with malice. He was quite frightened. This man was so scary. He was full of murderous intent. It was so scary. Although he looked like a very young and handsome man, his cold eyes made people's hair stand on end. Uncle! Uncle! Chu Xiaobao opened his mouth in a panic and said these two words. Chapter 27:13. Before Gu Jinglian could speak, Chu Xiaobao immediately said in fear, Uncle, don't chase me out of the car, okay? I was left here by bad people. If you chase me out of the car, I'll definitely die. Die? Gu Jinglian's lips twitched as he glanced around. What he said was true. If he was left here alone, a 5-year-old child would not be able to escape. No matter how strong he was, he would not be able to escape. However, this child could not tell whether he was a good person or a bad person. How could he be so sure that he would not be sold elsewhere? This child looked just like the little white dog in his arms. He looked pitiful and aggrieved. He was just short of hugging his leg and acting pitiful. Aren't you afraid that I'm a bad person? Gu Jinglian asked. Chu Xiaobao tilted his head and asked curiously, Bad person? Aren't you afraid that I'll sell you off? Uncle, you look very rich. Chu Xiaobao patted the genuine leather seat he was sitting on and said with a smile, Even if you sold me off, you wouldn't be able to afford this car. Uncle, you must be a good person. Gu Jinglian was speechless. The word good person had never been used to describe him. He curled his lips and said casually, I'm not a good person. Chu Xiaobao did not believe a word he said. It was hard for him to associate such an elegant and noble man with the word bad person. Hence he said sweetly, How can a bad person admit that he's a bad person? I think that only people who commit murder and arson are bad people. Uncle, you look handsome and rich. You must be a good person. Just as he finished speaking, there was a loud boom. The warehouse behind the car was hit by gunpowder. The fire spread quickly and formed a huge fire. Under Xiaobao's stunned gaze, a tall and burly man walked to Gu Jinglian's side and said respectfully, President Gu, the body count has been completed. It has been thrown into the warehouse and burned. Gu Jinglian nodded casually. When he turned around, he saw that Xiaobao's expression was stiff. He pointed in the direction of the fire and asked in horror, Why is there a fire there? Gu Jinglian said casually, I did it. Why did you set the fire? Chu Xiaobao was a little scared. His voice became softer and softer, and his shoulders trembled faintly. Because I killed someone and set the fire to destroy the evidence. Chu Xiaobao didn't understand the idiom, destroy the evidence, but he understood the sentence, I killed someone. His mouth instantly formed an O shape. Gu Jinglian smiled. Are you scared? Xiaobao swallowed hard and then nodded hurriedly. Uncle, you're really a bad person? That's impossible. Uncle, you can't be a bad person. Gu Jinglian was impatient and said coldly, Get out of the car. Xiaobao swallowed again. However, he looked carefully at the barren scene outside the window and shook his head. I don't want to. Chapter 27:14. The corners of Gu Jinglian's eyes twitched violently again. He understood the logic behind it. But what did it mean to win over a 7-storied pagoda? On second thought, he was a 5-year-old child after all. It was inevitable that he would speak incoherently sometimes. Chu Xiaobao saw his cold-blooded face and his seemingly indifferent look. His tears fell even more violently. He hugged the puppy tightly in his arms as if trying to arouse his compassion. I'm only 5 years old. I'm still a child. Uncle, please be kind and save me, okay? I won't pester you, and I won't blackmail you. Just send me to the county's police station, and that will be enough. Is that okay? Is that okay? Is that okay? Is that okay? Okay. Okay. Chu Xiaobao's coquettishness was definitely top-notch. At that moment, he was like a puppy wagging its tail and looking at him with a pair of innocent eyes, as if throwing him out of the car was a heinous crime. Gu Jinglian was getting a headache from his series of, okay. He frowned and said coldly, I can send you to the police station, but you have to be quiet on the way, okay? He had a headache. That was why he hated children. He was chattering like a noisy little bird, challenging the limits of his patience. Chu Xiaobao saw that he had finally agreed. His eyes lit up and his expression became lively in an instant. He nodded repeatedly. Okay, okay, okay. Uncle, don't worry. I won't disturb you. I'll be quiet and not talk. You just have to. Another long string of nagging. Gu Jinglian was annoyed. He got into the car and blocked his mouth with his slender fingers. He ordered fiercely, "Shut up!" Chu Xiaobao was frightened by his gloomy expression. He immediately zipped up his pants and made an okay sign with a clever smile. "It's fine as long as you can send me to the police station. Once I find the police uncle, he will definitely help me find my home. When I get home, I'll definitely send you a thank you letter and some local specialties from my hometown." Chu Xiaobao was so grateful that he danced with joy, extremely excited. Gu Jinglian furrowed his brows with a headache and appeared indifferent. "Up to you." The car started. The chauffeur turned on the heater, and a warm breeze blew through the entire car, filling the air with warmth. Along the way, the carriage was quiet. Chu Xiaobao closed his eyes for a while. After being awakened, his spiritual energy became vigorous. Hugging the little white dog, he leaned against the car window and curiously looked at the scenery outside. There wasn't much to see along the way. After all, it was dark at night. The empty suburban road didn't have any lights, so there wasn't much to see. However, Chu Xiaobao felt that it was a novel idea. He had never sat in such a high-end car. He grew up in Yen City, and his most vivid impression of cars was when he went to the county market and saw a three-pronged car. He excitedly pointed at the car and asked what it was. Chu Ho said that each car cost hundreds of thousands. Chu Xiaobao remembered it until now. Gu Jinglian closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep, treating him as if he did not exist. It was so quiet that Xiaobao felt bored. He looked at the little dog and said to himself, "Little doggy, you're not cold anymore? It's so warm in the car." Oh whoa. Chapter 27:15. After all, this cold-looking uncle had agreed to send him to the police station, which made him feel extremely grateful. He couldn't give him anything in return, but it was only right for him to praise him. "You're tall and handsome. Many girls must like you." Oh woo. Chu Xiaobao played with the puppy's paws and smiled. "If only I could be as handsome as you when I grow up." Gu Jinglian, who was taking a nap, heard this and couldn't help but frown. "Uncle, are there a lot of girls who like you?" Chu Xiaobao saw that he had his eyes closed and was ignoring him, so he turned to look at him with his head tilted. This uncle is really very handsome. He was more handsome than many celebrities on TV. However, he suddenly noticed something and exclaimed in surprise. He stretched out his hand and said, "Uncle, there's a speck of dust on your eye. Xiaobao will help you wipe it clean." Then he crawled over, stretched out his chubby little hand, and used his fingertips to wipe the mole at the corner of his eye. He actually treated the mole at the corner of Gu Jinglian's eye as a speck of dust. Gu Jinglian finally couldn't take it anymore. He reached out to grab his little hand and glared at him coldly. "Do you want to die?" Chu Xiaobao trembled in fear. He was obviously helping him wipe off the dirt. He wasn't asking for death. He immediately explained weakly, "I saw something dirty on your face." The veins on Gu Jinglian's eyebrows twitched. He said eerily, "If you make any more noise, I'll throw you out of the car." Chu Xiaobao immediately retracted his little hand. He was so frightened that he sat up straight and looked straight ahead. Gu Jinglian crossed his arms in satisfaction. He really didn't like dealing with children. However, it seemed to be ungentlemanly to kick a child out of the car in the wilderness. It was within his patience to give him a ride. Half an hour later, the car drove onto the outer ring of the highway. On Duga, the night view of the bustling city could be seen at a glance. Although it was already late at night, it was also the time when the city was truly bustling. If it had been Yen City, it would have been pitch black by now. Chu Xiaobao leaned against the window and looked at the charming neon lights of the city. His eyes widened in amazement. Countless lights were lit up. From afar, it looked like a vast starry sky, dotted with stars. Countless neon lights were flowing with brilliant colors. It was unbelievably beautiful. Chu Xiaobao, who grew up in the countryside, was also mesmerized by the bustling scenery. A surprised expression appeared on his face. "Wow! Is there such a tall building in the county?" Is that flashing light a lamp? I've never seen such a beautiful lamp. So beautiful, so beautiful. The little fellow's vocabulary was limited. After pondering for a long time, he could only think of words like beautiful and beautiful to describe her. Gu Jinglian instructed the driver, "After we get off the highway, send this guy to the police station." Yes. Just as the boy was engrossed in the food, his stomach suddenly started acting up again, and he kept singing, "Coo coo." He gently rubbed his deflated belly and encouraged himself. "Hang in there for a little while. There will be food soon." Gu. What answered him was such a desolate voice. The road on Duga seemed extremely long and far in his hunger. Chapter 27:16. In the end, he couldn't take it anymore. He mustered up his courage and suddenly tugged at Gu Jinglian's sleeve, trying to sound him out. "Uncle!" Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows and gave him a sidelong glance. "Yes, I'm hungry." Chu Xiaobao's meaning behind his words was, "Can you take me to fill my stomach?" Gu Jinglian seemed a little unromantic and asked back, "So? Is there anything to eat?" "No." Chu Xiaobao didn't give up and mustered up his courage to ask again. "I'm so hungry. I haven't had a full meal for the whole day." "So, Uncle, can you take me to fill my stomach?" Gu Jinglian's gaze was cold. "I'm warning you, gulp, my patience, gulp, my patience is limited. Immediately, gulp, after I send you to the police station, gulp." Every time Gu Jinglian finished his sentence, he was interrupted by the rumbling of Chu Xiaobao's stomach. He saw the little guy staring at him with pitiful eyes. His gaze was miserable and he wanted to say something. He gritted his teeth and glared at him fiercely for a long time. KFC was open 24 hours a day. 12:30 a.m. Business dropped sharply. The waiter was mopping the floor when he suddenly heard the sound of the door closing. Following that, he heard a lot of people walking in. The waiter looked up in confusion and was shocked by the spectacular scene in front of him. At the door, a handsome man in a black trench coat with both hands in his trouser pockets pushed open the door and walked in. Beside him was a little guy rubbing his flat stomach and following closely behind. Behind the two of them, a group of bodyguards dressed in black walked in. Every one of them was serious and solemn. Their cold eyes looked around and their aura was terrifying. The waiter was dumbfounded on the spot. What was this? Were they from the Black She Gang? However, I've never seen anyone from the Black Star Gang step into a Western fast food restaurant like KFC. The two cashiers, who were chatting idly in front of the counter, were also stunned. They trembled as they looked at the imposing group walking towards the counter. Gu Jinglian walked to the counter expressionlessly. Xiao Bao, who was beside him, stood on his tiptoes and stretched out his hands to lie on the counter. His eyes were sparkling, like a little mouse that had fallen into a rice bowl. "Hi, hi, hello." The cashier's teeth were chattering as she struggled to say those words. Gu Jinglian's cold gaze swept over. His aura was condescending as he looked down on everyone. The cashier was so scared that her legs turned to jelly. Gu Jinglian had never been to a place like this before. However, along the way, this was the only fast food restaurant that was still open so late. Although the man in front of her was shockingly handsome, she was still deeply intimidated by the terrifying aura that he exuded. Baby Chu, on the other hand, did not notice the strange scene as he curiously looked up at the menu. Unable to recognize a few words, he asked curiously, "Pretty sister, are there any steamed buns here?" "No." "Then, are there any soup noodles?" "No." "Fried rice? Egg fried rice?" "No," Gu Jinglian asked impatiently. "Then what do we have here?" The cashier's mouth was wide open in shock. It was big enough to swallow 3 eggs. Chapter 27:17. Forgive her for not seeing the world. There was actually someone in this world who had never eaten KFC before. There are hamburgers, grilled wings, fries, egg tarts, and cola. They are all simple Western dishes. After the cashier introduced the dishes with difficulty, her back was covered in cold sweat. Xiao Bao asked curiously, "What's a hamburger?" "A hamburger is a hamburger." "What's an egg tart? Is it delicious?" Xiao Bao imagined a tower, made of countless eggs. An egg tower. This was the first time he had stepped into such a luxurious restaurant. The dishes on the menu looked delicious, but he had never seen any of them before. The cashier was embarrassed again. It's quite delicious. Xiao Bao excitedly pulled Gu Jinglian's sleeve. Uncle, uncle, this beautiful sister said that the egg tarts are delicious. Can I have an egg tart? Gu Jinglian's lips twitched. He took the menu and pointed at the children's set meal, 2 sets. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. The total is 78 yuan. Cash or Alipay? As soon as the cashier finished speaking, a man in black suddenly strode over, took out his wallet, took out a bill from a stack of money, and handed it to the cashier. The cashier wished she could kneel on the ground to collect the money. After giving him the change while trembling with fear, Gu Jinglian walked to a booth. Baby Chu also skipped over, and the little white puppy followed with its tongue hanging out. After a while, the waiter served the set meal. The freshly made hamburger was soft and tempting. There were freshly squeezed fries, and cola with sparkling water. Everything was extremely novel in Xiao Bao's eyes. He held the hamburger in his hands as if he was holding a tribute and carefully tore open the wrapper. The aroma hit him, and he almost couldn't care less about being reserved and took a bite. It was delicious. Xiao Bao felt that the whole world was shining. The amazing taste almost sent him to the splendid clouds. This was probably the best thing he had ever eaten. 2 pieces of bread with meat. Why is it called a hamburger? That's weird. As he ate, his eyes greedily scanned the plate. He grabbed another French fry and put it into his mouth, eating it with relish. Gu Jinglian rested his chin on his hand lazily and looked at the night view outside the window. His slender fingers tapped lightly on the table. At the side, one of the subordinates suddenly discovered something very surprising. President Gu, this child looks a lot like you. Gu Jinglian couldn't help but come back to his senses. He followed the line of sight and glanced at Xiao Bao, only to see him taking big bites of hamburgers, stuffing his mouth until it was bulging. However, under the bright light, his delicate little face leaped into his eyes. Earlier in the car, the lights were dim, so she didn't see his face clearly. Now that his subordinate had mentioned it, he took a closer look. Indeed, the eyebrows and eyes were somewhat similar. Her nose and mouth are alike too. She looks just like you when you were young. The subordinate had been by his side since he was young, so he had a deep memory of Gu Jinglian's appearance when he was young. Seeing that Gu Jinglian was indifferent, the subordinate sighed again. President Gu was really cute when he was young. His face was chubby, his eyes were big, and the whites were distinct. I don't need your opinion. Gu Jinglian interrupted him. Chapter 27:18. The man immediately broke out in a cold sweat and kept quiet. Yes. However, Gu Jinglian took the man's words to heart. He began to look at the child seriously. It was rare for him to look him in the eye. Indeed, as his subordinate had said, this child's eyebrows were very similar to his. Even if they walked out, it would be natural for people to think that they were father and son. What a strange fate. Gu Jinglian asked with rare patience, "What's your name?" Xiao Bao Chu looked up. His mouth was full as he mumbled, "My name is Xiao Bao Chu." I can't hear you clearly. Xiao Bao Chu immediately hugged the cola and took a big gulp. He wiped his mouth and said with a smile, "My name is Xiao Bao Chu." The Chu in Xiao Bao Chu, the Xiao in Xiao Bao Chu, and the Bao in Chu Xiao Bao Chu. Gu Jinglian's face darkened. What was this? His naive and childish words made the people behind him burst into laughter. What a cute little guy. As Xiao Bao Chu spoke, he suddenly realized that he had spilled the beans. He quickly covered his mouth and looked scared, like a frightened deer. Gu Jinglian couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong now?" Xiao Bao Chu put his hand down. He looked hesitant and a little annoyed. After thinking about it, he said innocently, "Mom said that I can't tell outsiders my name." Gu Jinglian was speechless. Xiao Bao Chu suddenly changed the topic and smiled. "But uncle, you're so good to me. You sent me home and brought me to eat good food. So it doesn't matter if I tell uncle my name." "I didn't say that I'll send you home," Gu Jinglian emphasized. "I only said that I'll send you to the police station. Send me to the police station and I'll be able to go home." Xiao Bao Chu smiled. "Uncle, you're a good person. A good person will have a peaceful life." Gu Jinglian frowned. If he were to get married in the future, he would definitely not give birth to such a foolish son. The bodyguard beside him couldn't help but tease him. he said half-jokingly. Why are you alone? Where is your home? My family lives in. Chu Xiaobao opened his mouth, but there was a bit of vigilance in his eyes. Then he said carefully, my family lives in Dingqing, Yan City. His subordinates looked at each other. They had never heard of this city before. Where is Yan City? In any case, it's a very far place. At this point, the little guy couldn't help but feel a little dejected. He placed the half-eaten hamburger on his plate with a heavy expression. Mom must be worried sick. Gu Jinglian frowned. Indeed, it was very suspicious for a child to appear in such a remote area. Then why were you there? Chu Xiaobao sighed heavily. It's a long story. But didn't Uncle tell me to be quiet? I'd better not say anything. Gu Jinglian. Now he knew how to be quiet. He had been chattering along the way. How could he not know how to be quiet? This guy was obviously wary of him and didn't want to talk about it. He didn't expect him to be so vigilant at such a young age. Gu Jinglian watched him eat quietly. Chu Xiaobao was like a little hamster as he ate the two children's meals clean. Finally, he finished with a satisfied burp. Pop. Chapter 27:19. Gu Jinglian frowned. After eating his fill, Chu Bao slumped on the chair, rubbing his round belly and licking the salad dressing on his lips. He was extremely satisfied. Gu Jinglian asked, Are you full? Yeah, I'm full, Xiao Bao said contentedly. When the waiter saw that the little guy had finished eating, he immediately walked over respectfully and presented two cartoon dolls. Little kid, these are the dolls that came with the children's package. Here. For you. For me? Is it free? The waiter broke out in cold sweat. No. This is a gift. Xiao Bao held the two dolls in his arms as if they were priceless treasures. One was a Doraemon doll, and the other was a cartoon figurine with exquisite workmanship. Thank you, Auntie. He smiled sweetly to express his gratitude. After the waiter left, Xiao Bao handed the toys to Gu Jinglian as if he was presenting a treasure. Here. Uncle, I'll give you a toy. No. This toy is very cute. Xiao Bao looked at him with some confusion. A child's world was simple after all. He felt that such a cute toy could actually make him unmoved. He couldn't help but feel a little helpless and said reluctantly, Since Uncle doesn't like it, then I'll have to accept it. What a sly brat. Gu Jinglian got up. Let's go. I'll send you to the police station. Okay. Xiao Bao hugged the toys and jumped off the chair with his round belly. However, he was annoyed to find that he seemed to be too full and couldn't walk properly. In addition, he had walked for the whole day and his feet were badly bruised. Earlier, he had been thinking about the delicious food, so he didn't have any scruples. Now that he was full, the pain in his feet was even more obvious. Gu Jinglian had just turned around when he felt a heavy weight on his thigh. He looked down coldly and saw Xiao Bao hugging his thigh. He said eagerly, Uncle, hug. The bodyguards behind him were dumbfounded. This child was really daring. He actually asked for a hug from the boss? Can't you walk on your own? Gu Jinglian ignored him. Chu Xiaobao said pitifully, I'm so full, I can't walk anymore. However, he said the same words of wisdom again. Uncle is so gentle. Give me a hug. Good people will have a peaceful life. Gu Jinglian looked at him gloomily. Just when everyone thought that his patience had reached its limit and he was about to lose his temper, he leaned over slightly and held him in his arms with one hand. Everyone was dumbfounded. President Gu. She actually lowered her status and carried this child. Oh my God. After all, Mr. Gu had never been patient with children. Chu Xiaobao was elated. She gently kissed his cheek and said shyly, Uncle is the best. Gu Jinglian. He really despised this guy for kissing him. Gu Jinglian carried Xiao Bao into the car. When the little white puppy was about to climb into the back seat, he kicked it away coldly and said, Get lost. When Chu Xiao Bao saw this, she let out an ah and said hurriedly, Uncle, why are you so violent? This is my good friend. You can't bully her like this. Gu Jinglian's expression darkened. Good friend? Chu Xiaobao ignored his dark expression and clapped her hands at the little white puppy. She called out, Little White, come quickly. Come into my arms. The little white puppy looked at Gu Jinglian fearfully and nimbly climbed into the car, leaving a dusty paw print on the black leather seat. Chapter 27:20. Baby Chu looked up and saw the man's gloomy gaze. He then followed the man's gaze to the messy paw prints on the leather seat. His brain went boom, and he immediately realized that Xiaobai seemed to have gotten into a big mess. Hence, he hurriedly rolled up his sleeves and wiped away the dusty paw prints on the seat under Gu Jinglian's cold gaze. However, no matter how hard he wiped, those dusty paw prints could not be wiped off in a short period of time. This was because the puppy's paws secreted grease. Hence, such paw prints needed to be cleaned professionally. Chu Xiaobao furrowed his eyebrows guiltily. "Uncle, I'm sorry, okay? But Little White definitely didn't do it on purpose. You're a big man with an indomitable spirit. You wouldn't be angry with a puppy, right? In other words, if he were to be calculative with a beast, he would not be a man? Was he trying to provoke him? Kid, I don't have the patience. I'm not called Little White. I'm called Xiaobao." Chu Xiaobao corrected him righteously. Gu Jinglian finally lost his patience and slammed his fist on the doorframe. Chu Xiaobao was instantly shocked. He looked at Gu Jinglian's extremely gloomy face in horror and immediately shut up. He carefully shrank his body into a corner and lowered his head, as if he could reduce his presence by doing so. Suddenly he said weakly, "You can call me Little White too. Don't be angry." This uncle was handsome, but his temper did not seem to be very good. Gu Jinglian did not intend to lower himself to his level. Anyway, this kid was going to get lost soon. He got into the car and closed the door. Seeing him get into the car, Chu Xiaobao became even more afraid. He leaned against the window on the other side and shrank back again. Gu Jinglian glanced at him coldly and ignored him. "Drive." "CEO Gu, are we going to the police station directly?" the driver asked with trepidation. From the rearview mirror, Gu Jinglian glanced at him coldly and raised his eyebrows. "You know the answer?" The driver broke out in cold sweat again. It was so cold. Perhaps it was because Gu Jinglian was in the car, but he felt that the temperature was even colder than outside the window. He immediately turned on the heater. Along the way, Chu Xiaobao was probably full and knew his place. He was no longer chattering like before and had endless things to say. He just quietly hugged the little dog. After eating, he felt sleepy and actually fell asleep in a daze. She fell into a deep sleep. Her body tilted, and she fell into his arms. Gu Jinglian only felt a weight on his leg. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the little fellow's head was naturally resting on his leg. She was resting with a clear conscience. Children have big hearts. No ordinary person would dare to rest their head on his thigh. Gu Jinglian stretched out his hand and was about to move his heavy head away when Chu Xiaobao mumbled something softly. For a moment, he could not hear clearly what he was mumbling. Perhaps he had fallen asleep and was talking in his sleep. He paused for a moment and seemed to be in a daze. From his angle, Chu Xiaobao's handsome side profile was full of childishness. His eyes were closed and his little face was especially quiet. However, his body was slightly curled up as if he did not feel safe. His heart inexplicably softened. Chapter 27:21. Seeing the little boy shrink his shoulders, he raised his eyebrows, took a coat from the side and covered him with it. The bodyguard sitting in the front passenger seat heard the movement in the back seat and could not help but come back to his senses. However, he saw such a rare and precious side of Gu Jinglian. He was extremely tender and could not help but be stunned. Gu Jinglian sensed that he was being sized up. He looked up, but his eyes were cold and sharp in an instant. "What's wrong?" No, nothing." The bodyguard immediately retracted his gaze and sat up straight. Gu Jinglian said coldly, "Turn off the sound system." "Yes." The chauffeur immediately reached out to turn off the sound system. The car sped along, but the car was extremely quiet. Xiao Bao lay on his lap at ease and had an incomparably peaceful dream. In the dream, a tall man gently held his hand. When he looked up, even though his facial features could not be seen clearly, his imposing figure made him feel extremely at ease. The man held his little hand and walked on the empty and endless field. The blue sky was blue and white clouds were white, and the sun was shining brightly. "Daddy." He could not help but call out emotionally. Gu Jinglian closed his eyes and pretended to sleep. He heard a whisper like a mosquito. Even though it was a little slurred, he could still recognize that the little guy seemed to be calling someone's name. He opened his eyes and looked at him suspiciously. He bent down to listen, but Xiao Bao did not move anymore. "President Gu, we're here," the chauffeur said. Gu Jinglian looked up and saw that they had already arrived at the police station. The car stopped steadily at the entrance of the police station. The bodyguard immediately got out of the car and opened the door of the back seat. He saw Xiao Bao lying in Gu Jinglian's arms, sleeping peacefully. "President Gu, shall I carry him in?" Gu Jinglian looked down at the little guy. The little guy's expression was tranquil, and the corners of his lips were curled up as if he was smiling. Was he having a good dream? Seeing that he did not say anything, the bodyguard thought that he had acquiesced. He reached out to carry Xiao Bao. Just as her hand was about to reach out, Gu Jinglian said coldly, "Wait." His voice was not loud, but it was very deep, and it had a deterrent force that made people unable to look at him directly. The bodyguard looked puzzled, but he heard him say, "Can't you see that he's asleep?" The bodyguard was at a loss. She fell asleep, and then what happened? Didn't he say that he wanted to send the child to the police station? "President Gu, then, do you still want to carry him inside?" He carefully probed and asked for his opinion. Gu Jinglian looked deeply at Xiao Bao and said, "Let him sleep." It was just a few words, but it was somewhat unexpected. The bodyguard was flustered. "Then, tonight, where should we settle him?" "Gu Mansion." "Yes." The bodyguard returned to his seat. Gu Jinglian came back to his senses and realized what he had just said. He was also a little shocked. If it were in the past, no matter what the reason was, he would mercilessly kick the kid out of the car even if he was asleep at the police station. However, when he looked at the kid's peaceful sleeping face just now, he actually could not bear to disturb him. What the hell? He did not expect that the only exception he would make was for a child. When Song Enya returned home in the morning, she found out from Jiang Qiming that Song Jianjun's men had returned empty-handed because Mu Yanqing's men had taken Meng Qingxue away first, so they did not have a chance to make a move. When she heard the bad news, her body became slightly unsteady and her heart was in a mess. Chapter 27-22. How did this happen? Song Enya was shocked and furious. She grabbed her mother's shoulder and asked, "Does this mean that Mu Yanqing is in Yen City now?" "Yes." Jiang Qiming nodded. "He hasn't returned to the capital yet. According to the news, something happened to Meng Qingxue and she was sent to the hospital." "The hospital?" Song Enya was slightly shocked. Then her lips curled into a strange smile. Could she have had a miscarriage? "We don't know about that. Let's hope that's the case. In any case, the child in her stomach can't be kept." Song Enya was slightly stunned and asked uneasily, "What if it's not a miscarriage? Since Mu Yanqing has found her, he'll bring her back. If that happens, we'll be in trouble." Indeed. If Mu Yanqing brings that B*TCH back, it'll be a very troublesome matter. What should we do then? Song Enya was completely flustered. She could not help but resent those two men for being so useless and stupid. In the evening, when Song Jianghu returned home, Song Enya immediately asked for his opinion. "Dad, how should we get rid of that little vixen Meng Qingxue?" Uncle's men were a step too late. Mu Yanqing has already taken Meng Qingxue away. He was probably the only one in the Song family who was clear-headed and rational right now. Song Jianghu did not answer her directly. Instead, he asked sternly, "Where exactly did you go when you left the house in a hurry this morning?" "Yes." Jiang Qiming also thought of this problem. "I called you for breakfast this morning, but there was no one in the room. Where did you go so early in the morning?" When Song Enya heard this, she stammered, seemingly deliberately avoiding the topic. Song Jianghu slammed the table and rebuked angrily, "Are you still trying to hide things from us at this point? Or did you do something ridiculous behind our backs again?" "No, Dad." Song Enya had no choice but to reveal everything that had happened this morning and her original plan. When Song Jianghu heard this, he was so angry that his lungs almost exploded. He felt that it was unreasonable and said in exasperation, "How dare you do such a thing?" Song Enya found it hard to accept his uncontrollable anger. She said indignantly, "What else can I do? As matters stand, this is the only way I can think of. As long as the child in her womb exists, it will be the greatest threat to me." Song Jianghu scolded, "But you can't do that. What if Mu Yanqing finds out?" "So what if he finds out?" Despite her stubbornness, she could not help feeling a little guilty. What you're doing will only make Mu Yanqing hate you more. The relationship between the two of you is like an abyss of suffering. If he knows that you have such a vicious method, he will definitely guard against you in the future. I think your cultivation is still too shallow. Once someone like you marries into a tiger's den like the Mu family, you will definitely be plotted against. Even though the Mu clan's momentum was in decline, everyone in the Mu clan had profound skills. You can't win. What can I do then? Xianxia said aggrievedly, we can't just keep that child, can we? Chapter 27-23. Xianxia paused for a moment before continuing. Since he was willing to put down his pride and bring people to look for Meng Qingxue, you should know that this woman is not ordinary in his heart. It can be said that Meng Qingxue's status is much higher than yours. If she had some tricks up her sleeve, even if she didn't marry into the Mu family, she could still suppress you. That be asterisk tease. Xianxia gritted her teeth in anger. Then what should I do? Since Mu Yanqing wants to bring Meng Qingxue back to the capital, why don't we let her come back? Are we just going to sit back and do nothing and let Mu Yanqing bring Meng Qingxue back to nourish the baby? Xianxia was puzzled. Xianxia sneered and said viciously, there are thousands of ways to get rid of a child. Why are you in such a hurry? As long as the child isn't born, it's still in your favor. Xianxia turned her head away angrily. Xianxia's tone softened a little as he sighed. Your brother has no future in life after that accident. As for Enshi, she's still too young and insensible. In the entire Song family, I'm counting on you. Dad. Xianxia's eyes reddened. I feel that this is the worst kind of life. Who do you think is to blame now that things have come to this? At the mention of this, Xianxia was furious. You clearly have such a good hand, but you brought this upon yourself. Back then, I advised you to let go of Mu Yaja, but you refused to listen. Xianxia knew that she was in the wrong. In the future, listen to me. Don't be stubborn and act rashly. I won't harm you. You're still young. Don't be stupid in the future. Xianxia gritted her teeth and suddenly said, I understand. The night was dark and the wind was biting cold. In the ward of Yanqing First Hospital, Chu Ho stood in front of the window with a cold and solemn expression. However, although he looked calm on the surface, the uneasiness in his heart was growing. She was a very calm person. Even if she encountered great danger, she would still be able to maintain her composure. However, after Xiao Bao went missing, she started to panic. However, compared to ordinary mothers, she did not show hysterical panic, nor did she fall into a state of madness and uneasiness. The worst thing was that when she was pouring water, she had a lot on her mind and accidentally spilled the water on the ground. It wasn't that she wasn't anxious, but she knew that meaningless panic was meaningless. She had to be more rational to keep a clear head. It had been 24 hours since Chu Xiaobao went missing. She didn't report the case because even she couldn't provide any clues. Without any clues, even if she started an investigation, there wouldn't be any progress. In the morning, she rushed to the police station to investigate his whereabouts. However, she found that she didn't even have a clue. Find? How could they find him? Black Dragon Pool Village was a backward village. There were no surveillance cameras. Even on the roads, there were very few surveillance cameras, except for those that violated the rules. In addition, she didn't know anything about the car, even if she only knew the license plate. Chapter 27-24. When Chu Ho returned, Meng Qingxue had just had her blood drawn and had fallen asleep. Mu Yanqing, on the other hand, had been keeping watch in the ward. This man's patience was beyond her expectations. She did not expect this man to be so responsible towards his woman. Chu Ho walked to his side and asked, "What do you plan to do?" Mu Yanqing raised his head and frowned. "What do you mean? What do you plan to do with Qingxue and the child in her stomach?" Mu Yanqing remained silent for a moment when Chu Ho asked this question. Suddenly he said, "I plan to bring her back to the capital after she recovers a little." "You plan to give birth to this child?" "Yes." Chu Ho did not think much of it. "Then, do you plan to marry her?" Mu Yanqing did not say anything. Chu Ho gave him a disdainful look. "Scum." Mu Yanqing's face turned sullen. "What did you say?" "I said that you're a scum." "If you didn't hear me clearly, I'll repeat myself. How dare you? Mu Yanqing said coldly. It's not up to you to judge and point fingers at me. Qingxue is a good lady. If you don't want to take responsibility, please don't ruin her. If you still love her, then as a man, you should take responsibility. Just as Chu Ho finished speaking, the person on the bed moved. The two of them immediately looked over and saw Meng Qingxue slowly opening her eyes. Her brows were tightly knitted, and she seemed to be feeling a little uncomfortable. Qingxue. Mu Yanqing immediately leaned over. You're awake. The first thing Meng Qingxue asked when she opened her eyes was, Where's Xiao Bao? Chu Ho was stunned. Meng Qingxue woke up and opened her eyes. When she saw Chu Ho standing by the bed, she immediately sat up. Chu Ho, have you found Xiao Bao? She was so focused on Xiao Bao that she ignored Mu Yanqing. Chu Ho shook his head. There are no clues. Ah. Meng Qingxue could not help but look disappointed. She bit her lip and said, It's all my fault. This has nothing to do with you. Chu Ho had no intention of blaming her. Don't overthink it. Qingxue, let me ask you, do you have any clues about the two men who took Xiao Bao away that day? Chu He went straight to the point. Meng Qingxue's eyes were filled with confusion when she heard that. She rubbed her temples. She had just woken up and had a splitting headache, but even so, she still forced herself to recall everything that had happened that night. I remember their faces. Go ahead. This was also one of the clues. Two men, one man, triangular eyes, flat nose, thick lips, dark skin, not very tall, only a little taller than me. 170 centimeters? Yes. Meng Qingxue nodded heavily. From his accent, he seemed to be from the north. The other man also had a northern accent. His eyebrows were thick, his eyes were a little prominent, his nose was high, and his lips were thin. He gave off a fierce vibe. That day, the two of them were wearing black clothes, and then, Meng Qingxue thought hard again. Suddenly, she thought of something and her eyes lit up. I remember the license plate of their car. If there's a license plate, can we find them? You remember the license plate? Chu Ho was a little surprised. Hope finally rekindled in his heart. Chapter 27-25. Yes. Although it was dark that night, the lights in the house and the license plate reflected some light. I kept chasing after them, but when I saw that I couldn't catch up, I memorized the license plate. Chu Ho immediately asked, What's the license plate? Black A87B9L. Okay. Chu Ho repeated it silently and memorized it. I'll go to the police station right away and investigate this license plate. Could it be a set of cards? Mu Yanqing suddenly asked. Chu Ho said, It's better to have a clue than not. She picked up her clothes from the clothes rack and was about to walk out of the door when Meng Qingxue rolled out of bed. Chu Ho, I'll go with you. No. You're too weak. Chu Ho said again. Stay here and rest. See if you can think of other useful clues. With that, she left in a hurry. Meng Qingxue leaned back against the bed in a daze. From the corner of her eye, she caught sight of Mu Yanqing sitting at the side. Her face turned cold and she turned her face away. Qingxue. Mu Yanqing frowned and suddenly asked, Why did you leave just like that night? What else? Meng Qingxue retorted coldly. Since there's no hope, shouldn't I just let go? Do you still want me to be like how I was in the past, to compromise and submit to adversity? Even if there's no hope, to watch over you humbly like a fool? Then, to turn a blind eye to your indifference and continue to accept you humbly, waiting in the dark for you to change your mind? Mu Yanqing was speechless. That night, I originally wanted to put an end to the relationship between you and me. Meng Qingxue said, I made up my mind and packed my luggage. I called you and wanted you to make a choice. Either we get married and live together, or I leave you and return your freedom to you and me. Call. Mu Yanqing said, I was drunk that night and didn't receive your call. Yes. You didn't receive my call. It was another woman who did. Meng Qingxue smiled bitterly. She said that you were at her place and had fallen asleep because you were tired. Was I supposed to foolishly pretend that I didn't know? Then, like those concubines in ancient times, wait for you to come back from another woman's side before pampering me? Mu Yanqing was suddenly jolted. He remembered that he was at Xianxia's place that night. Could it be that Xianxia had said something to agitate her, causing her to leave in a rage? What did she say to you? I forgot. I don't want to remember it, either. Meng Qingxue appeared very aloof. Mu Yanqing explained, nothing happened between us that night. Do you think I'll believe your one-sided story again? When did I lie? What you did is what you did, and what you didn't do is what you didn't do. Meng Qingxue smiled. Do you dare to swear? If an oath really comes true, I can swear. Meng Qingxue, Mu Yanqing continued, Qingxue, come back to the capital with me. Don't worry, I will take good care of you until you give birth to the child. I will take on the responsibility of a father and raise the child well. Then, Meng Qingxue took a deep breath and asked calmly, will you take on the responsibility of a husband? Chapter 27-26. Yes, you're willing to take on the responsibility of a father, but you won't marry me in the end, right? Meng Qingxue glared at him angrily. She could not take it anymore when he did not say a word. Say something. If you don't care about status, I can bring you back to the Mu family. However, you know that I'm engaged. I can't take you as my wife, but I can give you everything except status. A good life, food, clothes and necessities, you can definitely. Shut up. Meng Qingxue widened her eyes and forced her tears back. She suddenly felt that it was ridiculous and laughed out loud. Except status? So what you mean is that I can live by your side like a mistress and receive your love without being exposed. Meng Qingxue grabbed a pillow beside her and threw it at him fiercely. She screamed hysterically, Mu Yanqing, why do you always say such things so confidently? A good life, glory and wealth? You know that I don't care about these things. Qingxue. Let's cut off all ties. Meng Qingxue suddenly burst into tears. I don't want to love you anymore. I don't want to live that kind of life anymore. I don't want to see the light of day like a pitiful worm. Mu Yanqing bit his lower lip hard. It was not that he was unwilling to marry her. It was just that he did not have Mu Yaja's boldness. Yes, he loved Qingxue. Perhaps it was only when he lost her that he realized what kind of person she truly wanted. Meng Qingxue's name had already occupied his heart. If he could. He also wanted to marry her in a grand and glorious manner. However, the Mu family's door was not open to him. He could not marry Meng Qingxue just because he wanted to. The Mu family paid attention to family background. What kind of background did Meng Qingxue have? Just her identity as a young model was enough to hit him back with a stick. However, he really could not give up on her. Qingxue, I promise you that I'll cut off all ties with any woman. I won't be a playboy anymore, and I won't touch other women. I will love you, only you, but I can't marry you. My family background, my identity. It's destined that you won't be able to marry into the Mu family grandly. But second uncle has already promised me. When the time comes, I'll marry you into the Mu family. Although you won't be my official wife, you'll still be my woman. Concubine? Meng Qingxue asked back. Her eyes were like a dead pool, dim and lifeless. Mu Yanqing's heart ached as he looked at her despairing expression. Qingxue, Meng Qingxue sneered and interrupted him. Mu Yanqing, you always have 1,000 ways to trample on me. She suddenly stared at him, gritting her teeth as she asked, do you have a heart? Do you know that when a person is sad, their heart will really hurt? Her questioning made him a little irritated, and his mind was in a mess. He suddenly stood up and his attitude became more resolute. I'll bring you back to the capital. What? I'll give you one night to think about it. Qingxue, you can't live without me, and I can't live without you. With that, he turned around and left the ward. Meng Qingxue stared blankly at his back view as tears rolled uncontrollably from her eyes. After all, he was that selfish. He had never really cared about her feelings. Chapter 27-27. Chu Ho took the license plate and went to the police station to investigate. Soon, she found out the whereabouts of the van. After the van left Heilongtan village, it drove from the provincial road to the Jianghu expressway. It was 6 o'clock in the morning when it finally arrived in the capital. Then, the van drove to a remote area. The next route was from the Jianghu expressway to Yishan City. After that, there was no further movement. Other than a few violations of the van, there were no other clues. However, such clues were valuable enough. At least the license plate was not fake, and the van matched the clues provided by Meng Qingxue. At least they knew that the van was in the vicinity of Yishan City. However, when Chu Ho proposed to arrest the suspect, the police officer who was working with her seemed to have some doubts. Chu Ho, this matter must be reported to the bureau chief. The process of arresting the suspect is very complicated, because these funds have to be approved by the bureau chief before the manpower can be mobilized. The problem is that the bureau chief is on a business trip and is not in the station. Even if the proposal is handed to him, the approval process is very complicated, and it may be rejected. This will delay the process for a long time. If you are willing to pay for it yourself, then it's a different story. Pay for it myself? Yes. For example, for the manpower that will be mobilized, you will pay for it. The police station will provide the manpower, and you will pay for it. However, the clues are limited. Even if you bring a large group of people to Yishan City, you may not be able to arrest the suspect. Chu Ho's face stiffened. Yen City is a small county after all. The annual funding from the provincial bureau is limited. The bureau chief will not approve this proposal. Are you sure that Xiao Bao is really in this van? I'm sure. Chu Ho seemed to be struggling. I'm also willing to pay for it. How much will it cost? The police officer pondered for a while and made an estimation. Then he said, a conservative estimate would be 100,000? 100,000? Chu Ho was a little stunned. Yes. Chu Ho's face became even more serious. If the suspect changes his target and we rush to Yishan City and return empty-handed, this money will be wasted. Chu Ho suddenly grabbed his collar and said coldly, this has nothing to do with money. Even a few million isn't as important as a single strand of Xiao Bao's hair. Chu Ho, don't be agitated. Calm down. My son is missing. How can I calm down? I'm already calm enough. Then, if you're willing to pay for an interprovincial arrest at your own expense, I can report it to the captain and ask him to dispatch manpower. But I don't have the money. Chu Ho laughed mockingly. He suddenly felt that such a system was extremely ironic. She clearly grasped Xiao Bao's movements, but she felt powerless. Chu Ho, we are also very concerned about Xiao Bao and his safety, but there is really nothing we can do about this. After all, you don't even have a household registration, so the director won't pay any attention to you. Enough. She didn't want to hear these pompous words. I'll think of a way myself. Chu Ho returned to the hospital in a daze. Just as he walked to the door of the ward, he saw Mu Yanqing standing at the door, leaning against the wall and smoking silently. She walked into the ward as if she did not see him. Meng Qingxue saw her return and asked nervously, Chu Ho, have you found any clues? Chapter 27-28. Meng Qingxue could not help feeling a little disappointed when she saw her expression. What's wrong? The license plate doesn't match? We already know the car's whereabouts. It's a white Baojun 730. Yes, that's right. However, I don't know the model of the car. I only know that it has 7 seats and is very big. However, the back seat has been dismantled, and the logo is a horse. After the car drove to the capital, it went to Yishan City. Then, since we've got a lead, shouldn't we be able to arrest the suspect immediately? We need the chief's approval. Meng Qingxue looked puzzled. What do you mean? We're just commoners. The chief won't pay attention to this case at all. Even if we have the suspect's whereabouts, an interprovincial arrest requires 100,000 yuan. The annual budget allocated by the provincial bureau is limited. The chief won't use that sum of money for a small fry like me. Besides, I don't have 100,000 yuan at all. Meng Qingxue was stunned and felt a little anxious. Then, are we just going to sit back and do nothing? We clearly have the suspect's whereabouts. Are we just going to sit back and do nothing because of this reason? Qingxue, this society is very cruel. Everything depends on one's background to make a living. You don't have one, so who will pay attention to you? Meng Qingxue was speechless. Chu Ho said, I'll think of another way. I can help you find the person. Mu Yanqing's calm voice came from behind. Chu Ho and Meng Qingxue turned their heads in unison, only to see him enter the ward. He said calmly, to me, finding a person is not a difficult task. I can help you. You're so kind? Chu Ho did not believe that he would be so kind. Of course, it's not without conditions. Mu Yanqing's gaze suddenly fell on Meng Qingxue. As long as you're willing to return to the capital with me. Chu Ho raised his eyebrows in disgust. Are you trying to use this as a bargaining chip to threaten Qingxue? How is this a threat? It's just a condition. Mu Yanqing shifted his gaze from Chu Ho to Meng Qingxue. Qingxue, I can help you find the person you're looking for, but the condition is that you must return to the capital with me. Meng Qingxue sneered, why do you want me to go back to the capital? I can't leave you here alone. Meng Qingxue bit her lips and gripped the bedsheets tightly. After a long silence, she suddenly smiled and nodded gently. All right. Chu Ho was shocked. Qingxue, don't force yourself. I'm not forcing it. Meng Qingxue smiled. Chu Ho, it's all right. It's just going back to the capital with him. It's not that harsh of a condition. The most important thing now is to find Xiao Bao. With that, she turned to look at Mu Yanqing. Can you really help me find Xiao Bao? Yes. All right then. As long as you find Xiao Bao, I'll return to the capital with you. On the other side, the Gu residence. In the spacious bedroom, Xiao Bao lay on the bed with his limbs stretched out. He slept exceptionally soundly through the night without any dreams. He woke up early in the morning. When he opened his eyes, the first rays of the morning sun had just appeared outside the window. He sat up and looked around. The spacious room was designed in an antique Chinese style. Even the furnishings were full of classical charm. It was solemn and elegant, and it was extremely grand. Chapter 27-29. It must have been sent by that kind-hearted uncle, right? He didn't throw him to the police station? He got out of bed and walked out of the bedroom. This was a very large suite. Other than the bedroom, there was a living room, a study, and a large bathroom. Walking into the bathroom, he was pleasantly surprised by the huge bathtub. Wow! It's so big! He mumbled exaggeratedly. The little white dog, who had been resting in the living room, immediately ran over excitedly. It circled around him and stuck out its tongue. Woof woof! The sound was crisp. Chu Xiaobao picked it up and rubbed its little head, only to find that someone had given the little white dog a bath. Its originally dirty fur had become incomparably white and beautiful. Its body smelled fragrant. Little White, you smell so good. Who gave you a bath? Little White huffed and stuck out its tongue, but naturally, it wouldn't answer him. The little dog's crisp barks alerted the servant guarding outside the door. There was a knock on the door. Immediately after, a maid in a cheongsam pushed the door open and entered. She smiled and said, Xiaobao, you're awake? Chu Xiaobao was shocked and looked at her a little warily, appearing to be extremely guarded. Who are you? You can call me sister. The maid squatted down gently in front of him and said gently, I'll give you a bath, okay? I wanted to give you a bath last night, but Master saw that you were asleep, so he told us not to wake you up. I can bathe myself. I don't need your help. Gu Nianji was young, but since he was young, he had been taught that there were differences between men and women. Naturally, he would feel shy when a woman of the opposite sex bathed him. However, the maid said, Master told me to help you bathe. Master? The image of a white-haired old man suddenly appeared in Chu Xiaobao's mind. The corners of his lips twitched. Who is Master? Master's name is taboo. How can we servants have the right to call him by his name? Chu Xiaobao pouted. I want that handsome uncle from yesterday to bathe me. Handsome uncle? Yes. It's that uncle who is very good-looking but looks very fierce. The maid didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Xiaobao, the man you're talking about, is it Master? Chu Xiaobao was speechless. He's not old. He's clearly very young. The maid didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This Master was not referring to the old grandpa. In the Gu residence, everyone in the Gu family had to respectfully address Gu Jinglian as Old Master. The Gu family was a wealthy family with 100 years of history. Therefore, the system in the family also maintained the old rules. Old Master was a respectful title for the head of the family. Gu Jinglian was the head of the Gu family because everyone in the Gu family had to address him as such. Master is still resting. Let me wash you. No. Chu Xiaobao lowered his head awkwardly, his face red. If you bathe me, I'll feel weird. Then, I'll stand aside and watch you. How about you wash yourself? The bath was very deep. If such a young child were to slip, it would be very easy for him to drown. She had this concern. Chu Xiaobao reluctantly agreed. The maid carried him into the bathroom, ran a bath of hot water for him, and carried him in. Chu Xiaobao protected his chubby body and asked with a red face, "Can you turn your back? I'm a little embarrassed if you look at me." This little guy even knew how to be embarrassed. Chapter 27:30. Chu Xiaobao had already learned how to bathe by himself, but his movements were a little clumsy. Half an hour later, he carefully climbed out of the bathtub and used a towel to cover his private parts. He then said, "I'm done bathing. Okay. I'll help you put on your clothes." "No. I'll wear my own clothes myself. I don't need your help." The maid had no choice but to bring the clean clothes over. He clumsily put on his clothes and even shamelessly walked in front of the full-length mirror to admire himself. However, when he looked at himself standing in front of the mirror and saw his disheveled appearance, he felt a little disappointed. He rearranged his clothes until the mirror reflected his clean and tidy appearance in a shirt. Only then did he smile in satisfaction. However, the clothes seemed a little too big. In fact, these clothes were not bought according to his size. In the middle of the night, the clothing stores were all closed. Gu Jinglian asked his subordinate to prepare a set of clean clothes for Chu Xiaobao. His subordinate searched the Gu residence and coincidentally, the son of the Gu family's butler was 6 years old. He had bought a few sets of new clothes and had not had the time to wear them, so he contributed them to the Gu residence. However, only the hem of the clothes was a little too long, so they barely fit him. "Aya, so cute." The maid sized him up and could not help but feel that he was extremely cute. She could not help but look at him again and again. Chu Xiaobao was a little shy from being stared at by her. His face was boiling hot, and he nervously tugged at the corner of his clothes, looking a little uneasy. "Don't keep staring at me," Chu Xiaobao muttered. Just as he finished speaking, his stomach suddenly grumbled, creating a huge ruckus. Aya, he was hungry again. Chu Xiaobao lifted his head and looked at her eagerly. The maid held back her laughter and asked gently, "Then, big sister will take you to have breakfast, okay?" "Okay." Chu Xiaobao's eyes lit up when he heard that there was good food, and he allowed the maid to carry him to the dining room. The Gu family's mansion was located in a suburban villa where every inch of land was worth gold. It was said that the Gu residence was a rare piece of land with good feng shui that had been passed down for hundreds of years. Therefore, it could be said that the Gu residence had a history of more than 100 years. 10 years ago, the Gu residence was renovated, and a large area of the Gu residence's courtyard was renovated. More than a dozen elders of the Gu clan, 4 hall masters, and more than 100 members of the Gu clan lived here. How big was the Gu family? To be precise, it covered an area of more than 100 mu. Among them, 60 to 70 mu were manicured courtyards and gardens, close to 150 bedrooms. It was located in the north and faced the south. On the east side was a side door for servants to enter and exit. In addition, there were 5 secret doors. A majestic stone lion was placed in front of the gate to suppress evil. There were nails on the door, 9 in length and 9 in length, a beast-headed door ring, and totems of tortoises, snakes, lions, tigers, and phoenixes. After entering through the main door, there was a wall photo, which was a screen. There were marble, jade, and also redwood carvings of birds and beasts. After the wall photo, there was the courtyard. There were artificial mountains and flowing water, pavilions, terraces, and long corridors with 9 bends and 18 bends. Most of them were where the servants lived. The men lived on the left, and the women lived on the right. Further in, there was a stable on the left, and a kitchen, laundry room, and other utility rooms on the right. After the courtyard, there was the main hall. There was an offering table, and chairs. Behind the main hall was the master's living quarters. Between the main hall and the living quarters was a long corridor. On both sides of the corridor was a large pond and a garden. There were many beautiful red carps in the pond. Chapter 27:31. Why was this place so big? The palaces he saw on TV were nothing more than this. Moreover, walking through the courtyard, there were bodyguards in suits standing at the door and hall, as well as servants wearing cheongsams. He didn't know that this handsome uncle was from a wealthy family. When he finally walked from the guest room to the dining room, Chu Xiaobao was so tired that he slumped on the chair. He was so tired that his eyes lost focus as he stared blankly at the antique wooden ceiling. He couldn't help but feel a little empty. Are you tired? The guest room is indeed a little far from the dining room, but just treat it as a morning exercise. The maid said with a smile. This place is really big. Chu Xiaobao panted slightly and said, I'm even hungrier after walking all the way here. What do you want to eat? I'll ask the kitchen to make it for you. I like to eat noodles. Chu Xiaobao said carefully. Okay. Is red soup noodles okay? Okay. The maid entered the kitchen. Taking advantage of her absence, Chu Xiaobao began to look around curiously, looking at every decoration in the dining room. The dining room was very big, with a strong new Chinese style. The tables and chairs were made of high-quality red sandalwood, and it was the most expensive red leaf sandalwood. Ordinary people might not think much of it, but red leaf sandalwood was expensive in the world, even if it was a string of beads. The Gu family was rich enough to polish it into furniture, cabinets, screens, and reliefs. Red sandalwood was also known as Hainan pear wood. Whether it was hardness, softness, or fineness, it was superior. From a medicinal point of view, it was Hainan Wangwali. It had a fragrance that could adjust the environment. Therefore, as soon as he stepped in, Chu Xiaobao smelled a faint fragrance that refreshed the heart. The ceiling was made of black rosewood from Laos. Authentic black rosewood was sold for 6 figures per ton in the market. Authentic black rosewood from Laos was the best. The black rosewood here was also called big leaf red sandalwood. In fact, it was originally called big leaf red sandalwood, but later came out of the national standard. In the national standard, big leaf red sandalwood was called black rosewood, so now the standard name was black rosewood. It was very expensive. The Gu family was rich enough to make a large number of hanging ceilings. If it had to be converted in terms of money, such a restaurant, which was only a few dozen square meters, was probably worth tens of millions. Although it looked reserved, it was actually extremely luxurious. Chu Xiaobao walked to a shelf and found an extremely beautiful vase. Out of curiosity, he couldn't help but take the vase down and hold it in his arms, touching it with his small hands. Behind him, the maid's gentle voice suddenly came. Do you like to eat eggs? Ah! Chu Xiaobao was startled. His hand trembled, and he almost dropped the vase. Fortunately, he was nimble enough to catch it. He let out a long sigh and turned around, but his heart still had lingering fear. Sister, this vase is really beautiful. Is it very expensive? When the maid saw the vase in his hand, she was slightly startled. Then she nodded and said, Yes, it was indeed very expensive. But this is not a vase. This is enamel from the Ming and Qing dynasties, also known as cloisonné. It's an antique. Xiao Bao's hands almost trembled again. Antique? Cultural relics? He had seen special reports on cultural relics in the Forbidden City on television, so he had a very clear understanding of cultural relics. Cultural relics were priceless. It must be worth a lot of money. He tried to probe. Chapter 2732. If it's put up for auction, it'll start at a few million yuan. The maid smiled as she introduced it calmly. Chu Xiaobao held his breath for a moment. He put the enamel back in its original position in trepidation, feeling like he had just survived a disaster. If he hadn't caught it in time just now, would he have to pay for it? But he had seen on TV that those relics were carefully placed in glass cases. No matter how bad it was, it wouldn't be placed so randomly, right? What if an antique vase was placed in the dining room and someone accidentally broke it? Chu Xiaobao asked with lingering fear. Since this is an antique vase, why is it placed here so casually? Shouldn't it be more particular and be worshipped properly? The maid said disapprovingly. Old Master ordered this antique to be placed here. Why? Chu Xiaobao was even more confused. Because Old Master thought it would look good here. What kind of reason was that? This handsome uncle was so rich that he didn't even care about antiques and placed them casually. He didn't feel the pinch even if they were broken? He was so envious. If he was so rich, he could eat 10 sanding buns every morning. He wouldn't have to worry about saving money for lunch. He could eat and drink as much as he wanted. If he was as rich as this handsome uncle, Wouldn't he be able to eat all the delicacies in the world? Forgive him for being so useless. As long as he could eat his fill, wear warm clothes, and have an endless supply of delicious food every day, he would feel very happy. When Gu Jinglian woke up, it was 9 o'clock in the morning. His biological clock was very punctual. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. When the butler brought his clothes over, he couldn't help but ask, "Where's the child from last night?" "Old master, the child woke up very early and is having breakfast in the dining room now." Gu Jinglian raised his eyebrows slightly. However, he heard the butler say, "Old master, what should we do with the child?" Since he was awake and had eaten his fill, it was time to send the little guy away. He had already made an exception to let him stay at the Gu residence last night. Hence, Gu Jinglian instructed, after breakfast, send someone to take him to the police station. "Master, won't you see him again? That child seems to be clamoring to see you." "There's no need for that. It's hard not to feel annoyed when I see it." "Yes, I understand." The butler nodded and retreated. Gu Jinglian held his head lazily and got out of bed. He walked to the living room and sat on the sofa. He took a sip of the tea that the housekeeper had just brewed. He was used to being particular about tea in the morning. He had a bad stomach. Therefore, in the morning, she was used to brewing a cup of black tea. It was warm and very nourishing for the stomach. Gu Jinglian felt relieved when he thought about how he was going to send the child away this morning. His ears finally had some peace and quiet. After Chu Xiaobao finished his breakfast, he heard the housekeeper say that he was going to be sent to the police station. However, he was a little reluctant and looked depressed. "What about that handsome uncle? I want to find him. Master still has something to do after breakfast. It's not convenient for him to send you to the police station, so he ordered me to send you there." Chapter 27:33. He lowered his gaze in disappointment, as if he was a little sad. He couldn't help but feel a little lonely. Does handsome uncle hate me? Does he find me annoying? The old butler was slightly startled. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The child's thoughts were more meticulous than he had imagined. Master had never liked children. He had never been patient with children. Master liked cats and had a completely black cat by his side. When he was free, he would carry the black cat and take a walk in the yard. It could be seen that Master's personality was more of a loner. He didn't like children. However, he couldn't say it in front of Chu Xiaobao. Otherwise, it would inevitably hurt the child's heart. "He's just a little busy." The butler comforted him kindly. "Master has a lot of work to do, so he can't personally send you to the police station." "Oh, all right then." Chu Xiaobao nodded. He smiled slightly and said politely, "Thank you, grandfather." "It's nothing. This is my duty." The butler liked this child from the bottom of his heart. It was not because of any other reason, but because this child's facial features were very similar to Master's when he was young. Especially that pair of eyes. Although they were not the same, they were very similar. The most different thing was that when Gu Jinglian was young, his eyes were extremely indifferent, as if they were condensed with an ethereal mist. However, this child's eyes were extremely clear and had a kind of spirit and alertness unique to children. One look and one could tell that he was an intelligent child. It had to be said that this was a kind of fate. The butler prepared a small bag for him. It contained some snacks and desserts, as well as some water. When he arrived at the police station, he probably wouldn't have such good conditions. After all, the police station was busy with their own matters and couldn't take care of him. He was afraid that the child would be hungry in the police station and no one would take care of him. So he thoughtfully prepared snacks and drinks. Chu Xiaobao was a little embarrassed to accept it, but the butler said, "This was prepared by Master." "Did handsome uncle prepare it for me?" "Yeah." Chu Xiaobao said emotionally, "I didn't expect uncle to be so handsome, so rich and so kind." The butler was speechless. The old master was handsome, young, and rich. He had to admit these 2 points. However, he couldn't agree with the phrase, "still so kind-hearted." After all, the child was innocent and did not know the ways of the world. The Gu family was not a good place. It was a dragon's pool and a tiger's den that many feared. Chu Xiaobao took the small bag with a smile and said happily, Then I'll reluctantly accept it." When the old butler sent the child to the police station, he happened to bump into the deputy director. The deputy director and the Gu family had been dealing with each other for many years. After knowing the ins and outs of the matter, he straightforwardly promised to help the child find a home. However, after some investigation, according to the clues provided by Xiao Bao and the names of his family members, they were unable to contact Chu Ho, because the internet did not have Chu Ho's household registration information. As for the phone number provided by Xiao Bao, when he called it, he was notified that it was not in service. Chu Xiaobao stared at the number in confusion for a long time. He didn't know if he had remembered it wrongly, but in his memory, this was the number. Chapter 2734. The deputy bureau chief was also in a dilemma for a moment. He patiently asked if Xiaobao had remembered wrongly. Xiaobao scratched his head, and for a moment, he also had some self-doubt. He used to memorize Chu He's phone number by heart, but he rarely called her. Usually, he would just stay at home and watch TV if there was nothing important. Chu He asked him to memorize her number just in case. However, as time passed, he could not remember the number clearly. When he tried to recite it with difficulty, it was indicated that the number was no longer in service. The deputy bureau chief started from the household registration information, but he could not find any information about Chu Ho. This was natural. Strictly speaking, Chu Ho was a missing person. After being missing for 4 years, the family could apply for the cancellation of the household registration. But what was even more worrying was that Chu Ho did not have any memories of her identity. She had tried to find her identity, but she could not find any information about her on the internet. When she lost her memory, she went through the police network. Whether it was DNA comparison, face comparison, or ID card information database, she could not find any information about her past. There was no information, only a few special identities. First, Chu Ho might have been a returned Chinese in the past. She did not have any nationality, so it was difficult to search her country's information database. Second, it was unlikely that she was an illegal resident. Third, her identity was special. For example, if Chu Ho was a special organization of Jianghu, it would be difficult to find her identity information on such a network. This kind of organization had its own information database, and only after leaving the organization would the information be placed in the country's identity database. For example, special agents, or black officers. However, Xiao Bao did not mention that Chu Ho was a missing person. More importantly, he did not know much about Chu Ho's past. He only knew that he did not have a father. The deputy bureau chief searched for a long time, but he could not find any clues. Thus, he could only propose a DNA comparison method. However, this required the technical means of DNA testing. To draw blood. The housekeeper told the little guy about this, and the little guy's face immediately collapsed. Draw blood? The image of a doctor in a white coat holding a huge syringe appeared in Xiao Bao's mind. He immediately said with a sad face, "That must be very painful." He lied to him. "It won't hurt. Just poke it with a needle." Chu Xiao Bao shook his head like a broken drum. No. Don't try to lie to me. Injections are very painful. It's so painful to poke such a sharp thing into the body. But if you want to find your mother, this is the only way. Otherwise, you can't provide detailed information about your mother, right? What about your father? At the mention of Daddy, Baby Chu lowered his head in disappointment and pouted even more aggrievedly. "I don't have a father." The housekeeper tried his best to comfort, and finally managed to coax the tears that was about to come out of his eyes. In the end, Baby Chu finally decided to compromise. Hence, the deputy director sent someone to bring the child to the hospital to collect information. This old housekeeper was quite good at coaxing children. Chapter 2735. He still had some tricks up his sleeves. After collecting Xiao Bao's DNA and sending it to the database for comparison, the deputy bureau chief said that it would take at least 2 days to complete. Hence, in the end, Chu Xiao Bao was still brought back to the Gu family. Gu Jinglian was originally checking the accounts at the casino when he received a call saying that Xiao Bao was not able to provide any useful information and was brought back to the Gu family. What? Gu Jinglian was obviously unhappy. Why didn't you leave him at the police station? The police station is short of manpower, so they won't be able to take good care of this little guy. Moreover, the little guy said that he wanted to go back to the Gu family to look for you. He seems to rely on you, old master, so... Gu Jinglian smirked coldly. Uncle Fu, I've never seen you so soft-hearted before. Uncle Fu smiled awkwardly. Gu Jinglian was too lazy to argue with him. Settle him down first and don't let him cause any trouble. Understood. Uncle Fu suddenly thought of something and had a flash of inspiration. He looked at Xiao Bao, who was fiddling with his fingers, and thought about it carefully. Old master, this little guy looks so much like you. Do you want to do a DNA test with you? Are you suspecting that he's my child? Gu Jinglian's lips suddenly turned cold and his tone froze. Do you think that with my style, I would be so sentimental as to leave a child outside? No, I don't mean that. Old master, please don't think too much, I'm just... Gu Jinglian snorted coldly and could not be bothered with him. He hung up the phone and continued to check the accounts. The accounts of the casinos were huge and could easily reach hundreds of millions. Generally speaking, he would personally check the accounts to prevent anyone from tampering with them. Checking the accounts of the 4 major casinos under the Gu family's name was extremely complicated. Only a capable person like Gu Jinglian could do it in a day. When the checking of the accounts was completed, it was already 8 o'clock in the evening. After dinner, he returned to the Gu residence. However, when he opened the bedroom door, he saw a certain little girl lying on her stomach in her pajamas on his big bed. She was reading a fairy tale comic on the bed with great interest. His expression immediately turned cold. When Chu Xiao Bao heard the sound of the door opening, he came back to his senses and turned to look at the door. When he saw that it was him, he immediately jumped off the bed and ran to him. He smiled and said, "Uncle, you're back?" Gu Jinglian's face darkened. "Why are you in my room?" "I asked Uncle Fu. He brought me here." Chu Xiao Bao didn't have any ulterior motives and directly answered. Gu Jinglian's face turned ashen when he heard this. He gritted his teeth and said, "This old man. Uncle, please don't blame Uncle Fu. I was the one who wanted to sleep with you." Chu Xiao Bao still knew how to make excuses for others. Gu Jinglian resisted the urge to kick him out of the door. He raised his hand and pointed to the door. "Go back to your room." He was used to living alone since he was young. He had been alone since he was 3 years old. This habit had never been broken even after he became an adult and had a woman. Even though he had had a woman before, he had never stayed with anyone. He was already used to sleeping alone. Moreover, with his unreasonable obsession with cleanliness, he hated having too much physical contact with anyone. For women, it was just a biological need. "I don't have my own room," Chu Xiaobao muttered, feeling wronged. Chapter 27:36. "But it's so lonely to sleep alone. Moreover, the room is so big, I'm a little scared. I keep feeling that this house is eerie and scary, as if it's haunted." Chu Xiaobao had seen a domestic horror movie before, and the plot was set in such an ancient house. Just thinking about it made his hair stand on end. Gu Jinglian's gaze turned colder, and his thin lips parted slightly. "Kid, my patience is limited." Before he could finish speaking, Chu Xiaobao suddenly grabbed his hand and led him to the sofa with a smile on his face. Gu Jinglian was pushed to sit on the sofa with a blank expression. Chu Xiaobao went behind him with a fawning expression and started to massage his shoulders vigorously with his 2 small hands. "Uncle, are you tired? Let me massage your shoulders." Gu Jinglian was speechless. This kid seemed to be good at bootlicking. Trying to please me? He raised his eyebrows coldly and glanced at him from the corner of his eye. He was not going to fall for this. "No. I really think that Uncle has worked hard. You must be tired after work. Let me massage your shoulders, you should be able to relax a lot." The corners of Gu Jinglian's lips twitched violently. Xiao Bao massaged his shoulders vigorously. Although he did not have much strength, he put in a lot of effort to massage him. After a while, he was sweating profusely and his back was covered in a layer of sweat. Gu Jinglian was too lazy to interrupt him. As he massaged his shoulders, he said patiently, "Uncle, your house is so big." Gu Jinglian did not reply. Xiao Bao continued to nag to himself, "One bedroom is as big as my house. Moreover, the bathtub is so big, it can raise so many goldfish. And it's not good to live in a house that's too big." Xiao Bao said eloquently, "Such a big house makes people feel very insecure. Moreover, it's eerie, as if it's haunted." Chu Xiaobao saw that he was indifferent from the start to the end, and like a loyal dog wagging its tail, he walked over to him and lay on his lap. He lifted his little face, but his expression was so innocent that no one could bear to reject him. I'm most afraid of the dark and ghosts. If Mommy was here, she would sleep with me no matter how late she came back. So, Uncle, can you keep me company tonight? I'll tell you a story and coax you to sleep. He finally revealed his motive. This little fellow was only 5 years old, but he was already quite scheming. He knew that he had to curry favor with someone in order to achieve a goal. Gu Jinglian smirked and retorted, Do you think I'm you? It's okay. Uncle's sleeping alone. You're lonely? I can keep you company too. I'm a very interesting storyteller. I can tell you any story you want to hear. He did not have the habit of listening to bedtime. Gu Jinglian commanded coldly, Go back to your own room. Xiao Bao's expression froze. Gu Jinglian's coldness had frightened him. When he thought of going back to that big but eerie room and sleeping alone in the dark, he felt extremely aggrieved. He suddenly pouted, and his handsome and adorable face instantly wrinkled. His eyebrows were slightly furrowed, and he looked like he was about to cry. Chapter 2737. Gu Jinglian suddenly felt a headache coming on. He was already fuming from reconciling the accounts. Now that he was crying and throwing a tantrum, his head hurt even more. As he cried, he saw Gu Jinglian's gloomy face. He was just putting on an act, but seeing that his expression was not, he was completely scared to tears. Hence, he sat down on the ground and rubbed his eyes with his chubby little hands. His wails were quite earth-shattering. It was as if the whole world was going to shake after his cries. Once a child's childish voice cried, his voice would be sharp and ear-piercing, especially loud. Gu Jinglian was shocked by his cries. He stared blankly at the crying little guy. Boo-hoo, boo-hoo. Uncle, you're so bad. You're so heartless. Boo-hoo. Uncle, you're a bully, he cried bitterly, and as he cried, he complained about his crimes. Stop crying. Gu Jinglian shouted at him. He glared at him fiercely. His fierce gaze frightened the little boy even more. Before he could finish a coherent sentence, Chu Xiaobao cried hysterically again, abruptly interrupting him. Wah! Gu Jinglian suddenly had a splitting headache, but there was nothing he could do about it. He was at a loss. He shouted at him again, If you cry again, I'll throw you into the pond to feed the fish. Wah! Uncle wants to throw me to feed the fish. Wah! Chu Xiaobao cried even more sadly, as if Gu Jinglian had done something so outrageous that even the heavens could not tolerate it. Gu Jinglian wanted to strangle him. He had never been patient with children, let alone the ability to deal with them. Just hearing Xiao Bao's cries echoing in his ears made him extremely irritated. The fiercer he was, the more Chu Xiao Bao cried. His eyes were red and swollen, and tears kept flowing out of his eyes. Pay attention, they were tears. He did not know where this child got so many tears from. They flowed without stopping. Were his eyes the source of a spring? Gu Jinglian had completely lost his patience. He suddenly stood up and wanted to leave. If this little fellow wanted to stay in this room, he would change rooms. In short, he didn't have the patience to coax this little ancestor. However, just as he stood up, Chu Xiaobao immediately cried and hugged his thigh, not letting him go. Uncle, don't abandon me. Don't abandon Xiaobao, Gu Jinglian said coldly. I'm warning you, let go. Uncle, other than my mother, you're the best person to me. Even you don't want me anymore. Gu Jinglian was startled. Chu Xiaobao's tearful and sorrowful attack left him at a loss for words. Xiaobao didn't have a father since he was young. Uncle is like Xiaobao's father. He cares about Xiaobao and takes care of Xiaobao. Xiaobao silently swore in his heart that when he grows up, he will repay Uncle well and take care of him when he's old and when he's old. This guy was cursing him? Is it because Xiaobao is too troublesome, so Uncle doesn't want Xiaobao anymore? Gu Jinglian said bluntly, Yes. Xiaobao stopped crying and stared at him anxiously. You're very annoying. Xiaobao's tearful eyes were glistening. Really? Xiaobao is really annoying. Very annoying. Sob. Chapter 2738. He was originally aggrieved, but now he was crying sadly. Gu Jinglian was upset. He got up anxiously, left the room, and slammed the door. Surprisingly, Xiaobao did not chase after him. Instead, He cried even more sadly and fell to the ground. It was as if he had been abandoned by the whole world. He cried with incomparable despair. Gu Jinglian slept in the guest room. The guest room was very small compared to the master bedroom. He liked large rooms. Perhaps it was his personality. He did not like small spaces, just like his ambition that could not be underestimated. Xiao Bao's crying made him full of anger. He went into the shower and took a cold shower. After washing up, he lay on the bed, but he could not fall asleep. Baby Chu's cries reverberated incessantly in her ears. He was completely brainwashed by his crying. He never thought that there would be a child who was not afraid of him at all and liked to stick to him. He never thought that he was fated to be with children. Young children tended to like people who were approachable. However, it was precisely the key word of approachability that he had no contact with. Unfortunately, he met this little brat. No matter how he threw a tantrum, glared at him fiercely, and shouted at him fiercely, he was fearless. Instead, he actually felt sad when he said those heart-wrenching words. Dependence? Why did this child rely on him for no reason? Gu Jinglian closed his eyes, but Xiao Bao's pitiful little face appeared in front of him. He suddenly opened his eyes, and his childish words seemed to echo in his ears. Uncle, I'm scared. I'm scared. You are the person who treats me the best in the world besides my mother. Even you don't want me anymore? This little guy was quite pretentious. Was he still crying? Could it be that because of his unintentional hurtful words, he was so sad that he did not sleep and was still hiding in the room and crying? Another scene appeared in Gu Jinglian's mind. Xiao Bao was trembling under the blanket alone, hiding under the blanket. Because he was afraid of the dark. He was so scared that he did not even dare to breathe loudly and was shivering. Children were all afraid of the dark, ghosts, and demons. He was only 5 years old, so he didn't have any ability to resist these things. What he said just now was indeed very hurtful. After all, she was a child. It was normal for her to be pretentious. Moreover, even if she liked to stick to him, it would only be for a short while. He was a man. Why would he be so calculative with a child? Gu Jinglian was caught in a dilemma. Half an hour later, he appeared at the door of the master bedroom again. He really felt like he was possessed. Gu Jinglian was dressed in his pajamas. He pushed open the bedroom door and thought that he would see the scene that he had imagined. For example, the clingy little brat was tossing and turning in fear under the blanket. However, as soon as he opened the door, the child's innocent laughter immediately rushed into his ears. Ha 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 ha. It was so fun. I want more. Gu Jinglian looked in the direction of the voice and saw Uncle Fu sitting on the bed, holding 100,000 little jokes. Xiao Bao was lying under the blanket, shaking with laughter. There were tears in the corners of her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness or fear. Instead, they were tears of laughter from the jokes. Gu Jinglian was speechless. What the hell? Chapter 2739. The child's face and the weather in June could really change so quickly. Uncle Fu heard the commotion at the door and immediately looked up. When he saw that it was him, he immediately stood up and smiled wholeheartedly. Old master, why aren't you asleep yet? Not asleep yet? Wasn't it because he was worried that the little rascal was so frightened that he couldn't sleep well? Chu Xiaobao also noticed him and looked over. First, he glanced at him. Then he crossed his arms angrily and turned his face to the side, as though he was angry with him. Humph! He seemed to be angry at him and snorted disdainfully. Angry at him? Gu Jinglian felt the anger that had subsided suddenly surge up again. He still had the cheek to be angry with him. Chu Xiaobao asked angrily, "Why are you back? You still have the cheek to look for me?" Chu Xiaobao said angrily, "Are you asking me to forgive you?" Humph! Scoundrel, big scoundrel, I won't forgive you. Gu Jinglian was so angry that his face was contorted. He glared at him, but before he could say anything, Xiao Bao made a face at him and said, "Scoundrel, go away. I don't want to see you." Gu Jinglian's face was as gloomy as it could get. He had the urge to kick him out. When Uncle Fu heard this, he immediately tried to smooth things over and coax Xiao Bao, saying, "Xiao Bao, you can't say that about Uncle. He's worried about you and concerned about you. That's why he came to see you." "I don't want him to worry about me," Xiao Bao said stubbornly. "He's a scoundrel and he hates me. Why would he care about me?" Xiao Bao, good children don't hold grudges. Uncle must be worried that you won't be able to sleep. That's why he came to keep you company. Uncle Fu continued to smooth things over. Gu Jinglian was furious. Old man, do you want to die? Master? Uncle Fu immediately walked over and whispered into his ear, his heart aching as he said, "When I entered the room just now, the little guy was crying sadly. His crying was earth-shattering. It took a lot of effort for me to stop his tears. I had to tell him a few jokes to make him stop crying. If you yell at him again, he might cry until dawn." Gu Jinglian was still angry. "You need to be taught a lesson. Old master, it's not like you don't know that when a child cries, the sky falls and the earth rends. If he continues to cry uncontrollably, the entire Gu residence will be in chaos because of him." Gu Jinglian looked at him coldly. "Are you blaming me? Make him cry? I wouldn't dare. This old man is not criticizing you, master." Uncle Fu continued to persuade him patiently. "Master, why lower yourself to the level of a child? Moreover, children are a little childish and love to cry. But this child is sensible, cute, innocent and kind. He's not a troublemaker. It's quite pitiful that he lost his father at such a young age. The Gu family will take care of him for 2 days at most. Once there's news from the police station, he will be sent home. Master, you're wise. Don't lower yourself to the level of a child." Gu Jinglian's face was still tense. "Why don't you go and coax him?" Uncle Fu tried to persuade him again. "I can see that this child likes you very much." Gu Jinglian took a deep breath. He didn't know where he found the patience to listen to Uncle Fu, and not lower himself to the level of Chu Xiaobao. Thus, he walked to the side of the bed and sat on his side, looking at him coldly. "Uncle, it's not good. Don't be angry, okay?" Chapter 2740. He did not have much patience, and this was his bottom line. However, Chu Xiaobao did not appreciate it at all, and continued to raise his little face proudly, looking as if he did not care about it at all. "Your apology is not sincere at all." Bang! Gu Jinglian's patience finally snapped. He clenched his fists tightly, making cracking sounds. Gu Jinglian suddenly clenched his fists. Uncle Fu saw that the situation was not good, and immediately rushed over and hugged his arm. "Master, calm down." Baby Chu was also frightened by the man's frightening expression. He swallowed hard as he looked at the latter's horrifying expression, for fear that his neck would be broken if he said another word. "If you have something to say it properly, don't fight." The little guy warned seriously. "Do you believe that I won't break your neck?" He gritted his teeth. Chu Xiaobao was so shocked that he was tongue-tied. He was so frightened that he immediately hugged his own neck, his face pale. How savage! He knew it. This scoundrel's gaze was as if he wanted to break his neck. "Murder is against the law. Here, my words are the law." Gu Jinglian said coldly, "Brat, if you don't know what's good for you, I'll really throw you to feed the dogs." Woo! Xiao Bao pretended to cry again. Uncle Fu immediately comforted him with cold sweat. "Xiao Bao, don't cry. Master is just scaring you." "Shut up!" Gu Jinglian shouted angrily. Fu Bo immediately put on an extremely aggrieved expression. Gu Jinglian glared at Xiao Bao angrily, and just like that, they stared at each other. After a long while, Chu Xiaobao swallowed again, licked his dry lips, and then said in a trembling voice, "Uncle, don't be angry, I'll forgive you, okay? Let's make up, okay? I'm not angry anymore, and don't throw me to feed the dogs." Gu Jinglian furrowed his eyebrows. Seeing his sincere attitude, Gu Jinglian's angry expression improved slightly. "It's a promise. Behave yourself and don't cry." Yes, yes." Chu Xiaobao immediately nodded his head like he was pounding garlic, his pair of innocent eyes staring at him. Gu Jinglian made a pact with him again. "Sleep alone, be quiet, and don't make a fuss, okay?" Okay." Chu Xiaobao was really afraid that he would throw him to feed the dogs, and quickly agreed to this condition. "Go back to your room," Gu Jinglian ordered again. Chu Xiaobao could not wait any longer. She nimbly flipped over and got off the bed. She did not even bother to put on her shoes. Barefooted, she ran out of the room. Uncle Fu immediately said, "I'll take him back to the guest room to rest." Gu Jinglian did not express his opinion, which was taken as a tacit agreement. Uncle Fu immediately chased after her and closed the door behind him. Once the little guy left, the room suddenly became quiet. Gu Jinglian immediately felt comfortable. He lay on the bed, and his ears were finally quiet. But what he did not know was that Xiao Bao was really frightened by him. After returning to the guest room, he hid under the covers. He thought that if he was disobedient and restless, this bad uncle would really wring his neck and throw him to the dogs. He was terrified. So much so that when he returned to the room and hid under the covers, he was so scared that his whole body trembled. His tears and snot wet the pillow. No matter how Uncle Fu coaxed him, it was of no use. Gu Jinglian's words left a huge shadow in his young heart. It wasn't until dawn when the little fellow was tired from crying that he fell asleep in a daze with tears in his eyes. Chapter 2741. On the other side, another 24 hours had passed. Chu Ho finally began to feel anxious when he did not receive any news from Xiao Bao for a long time. No matter how resourceful Mu Yanqing was, it would still take some time to find someone. After Chu Ho provided the license plate number to Mu Yanqing sent his subordinates to look for him. Because of Meng Qingxue, Mu Yanqing could not personally go to look for him. He had to stay in the hospital to take care of her. Chu Ho originally wanted to go along, but Meng Qingxue said that if he went along, the gains would not make up for the losses if he encountered danger. It was better to let Mu Yanqing's men go and bring the person in the car back directly once they found him. Although Chu Ho was worried, he could only force himself to wait calmly for news. Indeed, it would not help if she went. If she encountered a sudden situation and could not get along with the team, it would be counterproductive. Hence, Chu Ho waited patiently in the hospital for news. Meng Qingxue was even more anxious than him. She liked Xiao Bao. Now that Xiao Bao's whereabouts were unknown, she had a greater responsibility. Even though Chu Ho repeatedly emphasized that Xiao Bao's accident had nothing to do with her. However, Meng Qingxue did not think so. What she was thinking was that, if it were not her, baby Chu would not be implicated in this matter. Meng Qingxue was even more anxious. She did not know how to atone for her sins if Xiao Bao was not found. Just as she was feeling uneasy. Finally, at 3:10 a.m., Mu Yanqing received news that the target's car had been found. It was said to be parked at the entrance of a small underground gambling den in Yishan County. Gambling den? Yes. Are you sure it's a van? It's a Baojun 730 MPV. The license plate matches. It should be the person you're looking for. Mu Yanqing ordered expressionlessly. Bring everyone back. Also, take good care of that child. Don't let him get hurt. Do you understand? Yes. Understood. Yishan City was a large city right next to the capital. Although the city was large, it was economically backward due to its geographical location. Originally, the country wanted to support it, but Yishan City was surrounded by mountains. If it were to develop into an industrial city, there would be a lot of limitations. Therefore, Yishan City still focused on agriculture. Many young men and women who were born in Yishan City would go to Beijing to work after graduation. Tong'an County was one of Yishan City's counties with relatively good economic development. When Mu Yanqing's men arrived at the scene, they saw the Baojun with the black license plate A87B9L parked quietly outside the entrance. These two men were born and raised in Yishan City. One was called Luo Qing, and the other was called Luo Hao. They both came from Luo village. 2 years ago, they followed a large group of people from the county to work in the capital. In the beginning, they could bring home some money at the end of every year. However, as time passed, they gradually picked up some bad habits in the bustling metropolis. For example, gambling and ice skating. Ice skating was naturally not the kind of ice skating. They were involved in eating, drinking, whoring, and gambling. As time passed, the savings they had accumulated were all squandered. The money they earned from working was not enough to pay off their debts. Thus, when they were at their wits' end, they began to engage in some unclean activities. Chapter 2742. Meng Qingxue was the biggest order they had ever taken on. After robbing the money from Xianxia, they returned to Yishan City. Initially, they vowed to start a small business, but as soon as they returned to Yishan City, they plunged into the county's gambling den. In just 2 days, they squandered more than half of the money they had earned. When Mu Yanqing's men arrived, they followed the clues and found their car. Hence, they sneaked into the small gambling den. The gambling house was a common type of underground gambling house. They usually played bullfights and the like. It was not a big deal, but this was only compared to the big gambling houses in the capital. A single win or loss could easily cost thousands or tens of thousands. For Ishan City, where the average income per person was less than 2 days, this was already an astronomical figure. At this time, the atmosphere in the underground gambling den was at its peak. When he found Luo Qing and Luo Hao and Luo Qing were playing happily. Luo Hao was casually chewing on a cigarette with a poker card in his hand. Amidst the smoke, his eyes were half closed. Luo Qing was standing behind him, watching with great interest. Suddenly, someone patted him on the shoulder. Luo Qing waved his hand unhappily. "Don't bother me. I'm nervous." "Are you Luo Qing?" A man's incomparably cold voice suddenly came from behind. Luo Qing froze for a moment before turning his head in shock. When he did, he saw a few men in black suits standing behind him. They were tall and sturdy, and their expressions were cold. The man in the lead had a pair of hawk-like eyes that stared fixedly at him as if they were knives. Who are you?" Luo Qing swallowed hard and asked in a daze. "Don't care who we are." "Are you Luo Qing?" Luo Qing suddenly realized something, and his whole body began to tremble. He probably vaguely realized the identity of these people in front of him and staggered a step with a guilty conscience. Unexpectedly, he was also a quick-witted person. He knew that this group of people was coming for him and Luo Hao, so he quickly turned around and ran. "Chase after them." Luo Qing ran out of the door, quickly unlocked the car, and started it. Seeing that the men in black suits were about to catch up, he stepped on the accelerator and wanted to escape. Alas, who would have thought that he would fall into a trap? Did they not know who sent these people? Most of them were soldiers. After careful consideration, they had already guessed that these two people would be restless and want to escape. Hence, they had done something to the car in advance. The 4 front and rear tires were ruthlessly punctured. When they stepped on the accelerator, the car suddenly skidded, and the tires idled, and they almost flipped over. Luo Qing held on to the steering wheel, drenched in cold sweat. Knowing that he could not escape, but he did not dare to get out of the car. The man in the black suit stepped forward and grabbed the handle of the car door. He pulled it and it was locked from the inside. Luo Qing was secretly pleased with herself, but she did not expect the man to be so ruthless. She did not know where he got his strength from, but he pulled the locked car door open fiercely. "Get out of here. Behave yourself." Chapter 2743. Thinking that these men were sent by Xianxia, he immediately said, "I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have snatched that money. I'll definitely return Miss Song's money. 100,000 yuan. Not a penny less. Please don't take me to jail. I beg you." "What nonsense are you spouting?" The man kicked him fiercely, and Luo Qing immediately fell silent. Soon, Luo Hao was also dragged out of the gambling den. He had just won some money and was feeling smug. However, before he could count the money in his hand, a group of strong men appeared out of nowhere and dragged him out. Even when his hands were handcuffed, he still didn't know what was going on. It was only when he was taken out of the door and saw Luo Qing squatting on the ground that he understood what was going on. So that's what happened. He also thought that Xianxia had called the police to arrest them. He could not believe that this woman really dared to call the police. For a moment, he gritted his teeth in hatred. However, just as they thought that they would be taken to the police station for interrogation, a man in black walked up to them and questioned in a deep voice, "Where's the child?" "The child?" Luo Qing and Luo Hao looked at each other in shock before saying, "The child isn't with us." "Who sent you here? Did Miss Song send you?" "What Miss Song?" The man frowned unhappily and immediately took out a photo from a hidden pocket in his suit. It was a photo of Xiao Bao when he was 4 years old. Luo Qing stared at it for a long time before he realized who the child this man was talking about was. You're looking for this child?" Luo Qing immediately said, "This child isn't with us." "Where's the child?" "The child?" Luo Qing was in a dilemma. Luo Hao also said gloomily, "The child really isn't with us. Wasn't he left in that warehouse? We took the money and left. We didn't care about the child." The man furrowed his eyebrows, clearly confused. Thus, he gave the others a look one after another. "Let's bring these 2 people back first." Let Chairman Mu handle it. Yes. After a 12-hour drive, Luo Qing and Luo Hao were brought back to the capital overnight. In the ward, Luo Qing and Luo Hao were dragged into the ward. Chu Ho had not slept for 2 days and 2 nights. She was extremely sleepy, but because she was worried about Xiao Bao, she had not slept for 48 hours. She was so tired that her eyes were bloodshot. Chairman Mu, we've brought them. Luo Qing and Luo Hao were dragged into the ward. Their backs were violently kicked, and the two of them fell to the ground in an extremely sorry state. They struggled to stand up, but the black-clothed man behind them kicked them again. They could only kneel on the ground obediently with a mournful expression. Chairman Mu, these 2 men are called Luo Qing and Luo Hao. They are the people you're looking for. Mu Yanqing frowned and asked, "Where's the child?" Chu He stood up abruptly and staggered over to them. She sized them up before turning around and asking, "Qing Xue, were these 2 really the ones who took baby Chu away that day?" Chapter 2744. Chu Ho turned around again, this time without any grace. She suddenly went forward, grabbed Luo Qing's collar with one hand, and asked fiercely, "Where did you hide Xiao Bao?" "Xiao Bao? Are you talking about that chubby little boy?" Luo Qing asked in confusion. He did not remember the child's name. "Don't you care? Where did you hide the child that you took away from here that day? Speak." Chu Ho's voice was laced with a thunderous aura. For 2 days and 2 nights, there was no news of Xiao Bao, and her patience had been exhausted. Luo Qing was scared half to death by her fierce expression. He trembled all over, and even his voice was trembling. That child wasn't hidden by us. We were just following orders. That child was brought to the capital by us. Then, we took the money and left. That child was in the warehouse, and we didn't take him with us. We don't know what happened to him after that. Due to his nervousness and great fear, his words were incoherent and unclear. Chu Ho lost her patience and gave him a hard punch. This punch was so powerful that it almost dislocated his jaw. Luo Qing was so scared that his face turned pale, but he did not dare to resist at all. He had never seen a woman with such a terrifying aura. That look in her eyes was as if she could not wait to skin them alive, as if she was a wild beast that wanted to devour humans. Meng Qingxue got out of bed and asked angrily, "That day, you broke into our house, stuffed Xiao Bao into a car, and took him away. What exactly happened? Who ordered you to do this?" It was only when these 2 men were kidnapped by Mu Yanqing that she believed that all of this was not his doing. If it was not him, who could it be? "We were also following orders. The employer gave us money, so we did it for her. We took the child away, but when we brought him over, the employer said that it wasn't the child she wanted." What happened? Mu Yanqing also felt that something was amiss. "The employer said that she wants. As Luo Qing spoke, she sized up Meng Qingxue, who was standing at the side with trepidation. She wanted to say something but hesitated, seeming to have some misgivings. "Be honest and tell me everything. Otherwise, don't even think about leaving this place alive." Mu Yanqing chided sternly. With a plop, Luo Qing knelt on the ground in fright. He wanted to cry but had no tears. "Spare me. We have no enmity with this lady, but our employer instructed us that she wanted a child. We misheard her instructions and misunderstood her intentions. When we brought the child over, she said that she wanted the child in this lady's womb." Luo Qing explained in a trembling voice as she carefully looked at Meng Qingxue. Meng Qingxue's face paled, and she could not help but cover her lower abdomen with lingering fear. Mu Yanqing frowned coldly. "What do you mean?" "That employer said that she wanted the child in this lady's womb. She could either get rid of the child